52. Chapter 52. Magic Number. Crouch family manor Voldemort looked upon the twisting body of Bartimus Crouch Sr., minister for magic, pawn, and possibly broken tool. The childlike body of the homunculus had the face of an old man with the burning eyes of a demon. Yet Lord Voldemort was not the true horror of the room. That honor lay in the lap of Bartimus Crouch Sr., minister for magic. Voldemort hissed his way through charms in Parseltongue, even as his childlike hands fumbled with his wand to carve runes into the very flesh, such flesh as was left, of the minister. In the end, he hurled down his wand and hissed at his followers. "Ignorant child, you have cost me a tool worth more than you are. Shave his head, for you will need his hair, and then go plant him in the backyard." Voldemort hissed, too tired to shout, too defeated to care. Barty Crouch Jr. licked his lips. "Do you mean kill and bury him, my lord?" he said, eager to murder his father for the eternal glory of his dark lord. Voldemort found the strength to summon his wand wordlessly. Speaking once, he spent the last of his strength on education. Perhaps he should have been a good dark arts instructor after all. Instruction did have a joy of its own. Old man Dumbledore wasn't always wrong. Crucio. The red bar connected the Dark Lord to Barty Crouch Jr. Plant him, as in set him upright, and leave him standing on good soil, with adequate sun. You sent your father to order the Goblet of Fire to choose Harry Potter as Hogwarts champion, and now my captive and enslaved minster of magic is more than halfway turned into a tree. He will be a tree, an ash, I think, and a particularly long-lived one that offers no little protection for this manor, and all who shelter here. If I am going to have a minister of magic to betray the ministry to me and deliver Harry Potter, you're going to have to take the hair that I told you to cut and polyjuice yourself as him. Something you can only do while he's both still alive and at least remembers being human. How long that will persist now that his ass is ash, I do not know. This is fairy magic, so they would be most amused if he always remembered he was a man. Lucius No Name. Once Malfoy watched Barty Crouch writhe in pain, and his brow furrowed with an unasked question. "Out with it, Lucius, since you are going to have to muddle through the polyjuice for this idiot. He was always useless in anything that didn't require active spellwork. You have earned at least an answer." Lucius blurted out his question. When Bartimus Crouch Sr. used Confundus on the Goblet of Fire to insert Harry Potter as the champion of Gringotts, even his mediocre magic was able to do it. Barty Crouch Jr., using his father under the Imperius, just tried to confundus it again to ignore the Hogwarts students who got their names in and choose Harry instead, and the goblet turned Bartimus into a tree. What changed? Voldemort chuckled. "You never took arithmancy, just ancient runes. Sloppy scholarship gets witches and wizards killed. There is a power in numbers. We stole this cup thousands of years ago, the cauldron of Dagda, the cauldron the 4 cities used to settle their battles between champions. When we used it, we bent it to our will in the Tri-Wizard tournament. We lulled it to sleep. Its 4 cities called it to war no more. It dreamed its way through the years, as our Tri-Wizard tournament was only close enough to leech off the magics, not strong enough to wake it. 3 schools, and it followed the rules. We fed it for 3 schools, always and forever waiting the call to wake for the war of the 4 cities to resume, but we would never be stupid enough to let it." Voldemort suddenly remembered, then pointed his wand at Barty again. "Crucio!" Barty screamed, and in the hellish light of the sustained red beam, the Dark Lord's face lit with joy. Then this idiot's father gave it a 4th city again. No longer did it sleep and dream the pale copy of the Triwizard Cup and sip gently from the souls of champions we fed it. Now it waked again, and not just anywhere. We planted it inside the biggest confluence of ley lines in all of magical Europe, inside the most powerful concentration of wards and magical blood in all of Europe, and woke it up. Invited into the heart of defenses I left for last in my war plans at my peak. Defenses Grindelwald never planned on facing head-on. It comes awake for the first time, actually singing its joy to again receive the souls of 4 champions battling for the 4 sacred cities of Tuatha Dedanan. And this idiot just tells it to forget what I told you, go back to sleep, be a good little cauldron, and do what the humans tell you. Dumbledore could not make it let go now, and I would be far too wise to try. Were any of my beloved inner circle bound to this damned thing, I would bless them for their sacrifice and move on. The wise do not meddle in the doings of the ancient Fae. The days of champions strong and wise enough to succeed were gone before we began writing down the lies we call history. Turning to Lucius, he smiled a more human smile. Now, the challenges and prizes are things the ministry supplied. The goblet of fire may dictate, but it leaves the logistics to us. The Muggles have a saying, the devil is in the details. I am the devil, so we shall have to tweak these details. Harry Potter must be a champion like no other. He must shine like the brightest star in the sky. He must become the vision of hope that wizarding Britain turns to in its hour of need. When I stretch forth my hand and rip him from the sky, they will know that all hope died with him. The laughter of Lord Voldemort reminded Lucius, once the Lord Malfoy, why in the height of his power and pride he had crawled on his belly to kiss the hem of his Dark Lord's robes. Voldemort was power, and the world needed reminding. As an aside, he murmured to Lucius, "Do remind Barty to water his father once he is planted in the garden. The sacred ash trees are all tremendously powerful warding items. Find me a Death Eater with decent herbology newts. I won't have my best defense suffer from aphids or root rot because none of you idiots studied anything that couldn't scream." Outside the Dada classroom, Monday morning, Professor Snape found himself meeting Professor Sprout as they closed upon the Dada classroom from opposite sides, pulling up short and both looking equally embarrassed for those who could read the micro-expressions of a trained Slytherin. Professor Snape fell back on etiquette, as the esoteric rules of etiquette provided guidance through those social situations that otherwise fell far outside rational judgment as to proper action, as he opened the door and bowed the senior witch through. Professor Sprout nodded gracefully at the gesture, and they both strode to the desk of one slightly bemused Professor Scrimgeour. Well, well, two heads of house before class even starts. To what do I owe the honor? Rufus Scrimgeour had survived as chief aura under a manifest incompetent minister prone to overreaction, and a DMLE head with zero tolerance for mistakes. This was not his first rodeo, but he could tell when the ride was about to get bumpy. Professor Sprout handed over a note. I thought, considering the nature of the note, I would deliver it personally, so that any implication that it was a forgery or some sort of joke could be banished before it was raised. Scrimgeour gave a smile you almost had to be Slytherin to appreciate. He slid the note across his desk, eyed the two heads of house, then tapped it with his wand and raised the edge of it, keeping the bulk of it face down so no one but him could see it. Snape was momentarily reminded of professional poker players he had known when he spent a summer playing poker professionally to work on his control of facial expression and body tells for his own political and professional career. For that reason, the freeze and twitch of eyebrow from Scrimgeour were noted by Snape as being the equivalent of a Gryffindor falling from his seat and shouting in surprise, or a Ravenclaw giving it two full rereads, followed by an examination under microscope to be sure no other hidden messages in microdots were concealed inside the visible words. Snape was not disappointed when Scrimgeour was driven to ask for clarification. Mr. Longbottom is to be excused from class today because of a critical farming incident. I had noticed Mr. Longbottom is reasonably skilled with a wand, Professor Sprout coughed, and was now blushing furiously for some reason. Scrimgeour stopped momentarily, knowing he missed something, but not what, then continued, and had consistently excellent marks in herbology. Am I to understand that he had some sort of accident with farm equipment? Was he perhaps unable to handle a plow and accidentally cut off a foot? Professor Sprout stood tall and said firmly, Mr. Longbottom can indeed plow a mighty furrow, and his fields are well tended indeed. It is simply that he was so exhausted by his efforts in that field that he requires bed rest and fluids. Scrimger worked hard to decode that, failed utterly, and turned to Professor Snape. And you Severus, another farming accident. Not terribly Slytherin, is it? Scrimgeour said, smiling brightly. Severus Snape eyed his former upperclassman and slid his own note across wordlessly. Scrimgeour eyed the sealed note, then flipping it face down, tapped it with his wand and bent it up enough to scan the short lines of prose before again, freezing and seeing both an eyebrow and lip twitch in an aborted smirk. Mr. Malfoy is to be excused because he attended a tea party and requires a full day to recover. Rufus Scrimgeour, a former law enforcement official who had received more sick calls from Aurors than anyone this side of Mad Eye Moody, decoded using the code book of his experience, and for once was incorrect. Severus, are you telling me your 14-year-old godson is too hungover to come to class? Merlin's beard man, you are a potions master. Do what I did to my Aurors who tried that. Force down a sober-up potion, a nutrient potion, an energy potion, and a firm, stinging hex to the ass for being one. Severus Snape drew himself up to his full height and looked down his nose at the Dada instructor. Draco Malfoy attended a tea party last night. The after effects of this will require at least a full day's bed rest, a number of calming drafts, and no little amount of advanced occlumency, psychotherapy, and perhaps memory charm surgery to recover from. The only thing that he drank was tea. Pomona Sprout now looked at Severus with alarm, suspicion dawning on her. She asked carefully of Snape's dignity and the student's privacy. Severus, would I be correct in assuming that a number of the ladies at this tea party were of the sort that one can never know what will offend, nor what exactly the consequences for such offences could be, beyond alarming? Pomona offered gently. Severus spared her a glance and nod. 3 rather complicated and demanding ladies, and one that while less demanding is rather more complicated. Pomona Sprout nodded, then turned to Professor Scrimgeour. Professor Scrimgeour, my Neville only had to deal with 3 complicated ladies in his farming incident. If young Draco had to deal with 4, his housemaster is doing his due diligence in keeping him from class today. Scrimgeour could not keep the smile from his face now, his smirk making Snape twitch. That must have been some tea party. Scrimgeour's chuckles drove Snape and Sprout from his office as the Dada instructor settled in to what he just knew would be an interesting day. Dada first class, first-year Gryffindor/Ravenclaw Professor Scrimgeour was less than happy to see Dolores Umbridge in pink that should be regulated by the Ministry as an offensive weapon file in after his first-year students. Scrimgeour shoved the sunflower in the clay pot to the corner of his desk before walking around to the front of the desk and perching on it. Good morning, class. Now today I was supposed to begin teaching you about the terrible magical dangers of Grindylows, but they are found at the bottom of the Black Lake and not wandering around Hogwarts hallways. So I thought we would begin with something of rather more imminent need and something that is within the power of beginning first years like yourself. Dolores Umbridge spoke up from the back. Hem hem, the Ministry eek. Dolores Umbridge attempted speech ended in a screech as Scrimgeour tossed something gold and shiny at her head, which fell off her raised handbag to the desk. What did you throw at me? Do you know who I am? Dolores began. Scrimgeour smirked and silenced her brutally. A throat lozenge for that annoying cough. And you are not the Dada instructor, and this is the Dada class, so you will provide a moral example to these students by opening your ears, shutting your mouth, and respecting the authority granted me as the instructor of this class. While she gave her impression of a toad looking for flies, mouth flapping open in shock, then slamming closed, only to open again in more shock as she slowly processed her feelings like a machine a few cogs short of a full clockwork, Scrimgeour continued. You may have noticed that Hogwarts has been infested by fairies of all kinds. Now the stock and trade of the minor fairies is illusion. The reason they went away when our ancestors got here is simple. Scrimgeour pulled out a knife from his left wrist sheath. Iron, fairy magic is easier to work than ours. They don't need chance, they don't need wands, they don't even need potions, because all the low-level fairy magic relies on the unreal. The reason they fled before our ancestors is this. Scrimgeour tapped the sunflower pot on his desk with the flat of his knife, and instantly it was a little green fairy with an evil-looking face. It shrieked and sprinted out of the room as Scrimgeour smiled. Iron defeats glamours made only with the unreal, so you will find most auras have an iron knife or 3 on their person, and more often than not, iron toe and heel caps on our shoes and boots. Nothing like going to step on a stair that isn't there to ruin your whole day. Scrimgeour smiled in memory. Scrimgeour pulled up a box that must have weighed about 60 pounds. I had Professor McGonagall transfigure a few hundred rings out of some iron I had the goblins send over. You will get in the habit of touching anything you eat or drink with this. You will touch your wand and books with this each, and every time you pick them up, or you may one day find yourself in a fight with a fairy, and the wand in your hand is a piece of celery, a breadstick, or a rather confused gnome. He smiled. If you are interested, I can give you the case files for the auras those happen to. Not pleasant reading, and don't look at the pictures before lunch or bedtime. Professor Scrimgeour. Dolores Umbridge warned. That information is restricted by the Ministry. It is only released for aura training because the head of the DMLE has stood on her legal right to refuse unless a full Wizargamot endorses the restriction, and certain factions refuse to cooperate. There is no reason to teach this antiquated and outdated nonsense to our children. You will teach the curriculum, or you will be fired. I will not have this school made a laughingstock in front of all of Wizarding Europe while we are hosting the Tri-Wizard tournament. Scrimgeour looked at Umbridge, who was waving her wand at him. He smiled and stood back, taking a single iron ring from the box. I will make you a wager. Why don't you attempt to banish these rings? I will not block or shield them in any way. If you can manage a simple third-year banishment, and since you work for the Ministry you must have at least got above a troll on your charms, I will stop all mention of fairy magic in Dada for my entire time here at Hogwarts. Of course, if you can't you must leave my classroom and stop interfering in my instruction. Scrimgeour said sweetly. Umbridge took her wand in two hands, muttering to herself for about a minute as she rehearsed the incantation and practiced the wand movements to be sure she remembered. Finally, with a look of great seriousness, she finally cast the long-form banishment, seeking to utterly unmake the rings. Non est amplius, she chanted and waved her wand. In an easy, underhanded motion, Scrimgeour tossed the iron ring to bounce off her madly waving wand. In a flash, the wand was now a somewhat longer and thicker implement, a rather personal item used with far more discretion in very private, or at least intimate settings. My wand, screeched Dolores Umbridge. Actually, that is a sex toy, and entirely inappropriate to share with a class of first years. I would suggest you find an iron ring of your own, and test your purse whenever you are foolish enough to put it down on or below a table, as fairies do love their little jokes, and your actual wand is now somewhere in the castle in the hands of a fairy with decidedly adult tastes, unless that item might also have been in your purse. In which case test everything in your purse, as your wand may now simply resemble a makeup compact, tissue paper, or another sex toy. Umbridge shot from the class, her face matching her dress. Scrimgeour continued his lesson, passing the box of rings around so students could find one that fits. The magic we teach you is slower, more complicated, more energy-intensive, and requires a focus like a wand or potion until you get very good, but the magic channels the unreal to make real effects. It is not defeated by the touch of cold iron. In a castle full of fairies, you do not trust toilet paper you have not tested with cold iron, lest you find it was poison ivy some fairy thought would be fun to make look like toilet paper. Scrimgeour smiled. First and last lesson of defense against the dark arts, constant vigilance. The class of first years jumped. It made him laugh. He was going to enjoy his year teaching, he thought. It gave him a chance to do unto others what Mad-Eye Moody so enjoyed doing unto him when he was a trainee aura. Rufus wondered briefly how the old bastard was doing. Family picnic, little Hangleton Alastair Moody stumbled as he walked. Damn that Potter. Sirius Black laughed unsympathetically. Voldemort cut that leg off you before Harry was even born. You can hardly blame him. Sirius laughed, and BG, his basilisk, hissed laughter. I bloody well can, Alastair snarled. This is my sixth new leg since Harry and his pet squirrel went and gave me a magical tattoo. Now I need a new one again. Narcissa sighed. How are Miss Granger and Lord Potter responsible for your prosthetic woes? Narcissa asked, stroking Estheno's head, the basilisk she had named for Medusa's sister in Greek mythology. Moody stopped and reefed up his pant leg, showing a prosthetic that started just above the foot. The damned thing's been growing back since she stitched me up. I can feel my eye socket getting uncomfortable too as that is starting to regrow. Cursed wounds don't heal, everybody knows that, so it isn't like I can get prosthetics that adjust for me having a bit more leg every time I wake up. Moody chortled happily. Sirius snorted while Narcissa stopped in shock. That was impossible. Cursed wounds do not regrow. Like the wounds she had taken from Draco's birth, the magical cost's pain in flesh and blood were permanent. Everyone knew that. She felt the runes in her skin, and felt the magic move inside her in a deeper and more potent current than she had ever known prior to binding herself to Harry's clan. She might have to start practicing her contraceptive charms again. She had known since Draco's birth she could never be pregnant again. If Moody could regain his eye and leg, Narcissa might just have to start practicing her contraceptive charms again. Or not. She had enjoyed motherhood. It was just Lucius that was a mistake. Well, Beltane was coming. Miracles can happen, and Mother Magic did love her little jokes. Sirius stopped. Bugger, missed it again. I know the shack is here. I arrested Marvolo Gaunt for raping a muggle back in 78. He got off, but then again it was Old Man Nut who was the judge, so not much of a surprise. I swear we have walked past it 3 times at least. Mad Eye stopped and smiled. I have had enough walking. I don't care what they hid it behind. Once you know it's there, you can break it down. Brute force doesn't get half the credit it deserves. Narcissa raised an eyebrow, offended at the thought of abandoning subtlety and secrecy before they had even begun, but she could not detect the place she knew to be there either. With a sigh, she gestured to Alastair to proceed. Alastair hissed to Carney, "Watch my back. I am going to have to give all my concentration to this." Alastair Moody's basilisk Carney, short for Constance Vigilance, hissed back, "If I kill it, you will bring it home for me to eat." Moody laughed and cuffed the snake affectionately. No work for free, and Death Eaters tend to be well-aged and marbled. Narcissa massaged her forehead. Alastair, you are a bad influence on your basilisk. Whatever else she had to say stopped when she saw the runes Alastair Moody was scratching in the ground with his battle staff. He went on a long time, and she began to become alarmed. Little Hangleton was the middle of nowhere as far as wizarding Britain was concerned, but the level of magic Alastair was preparing to unleash would not be out of place to destroy a warded manor or ministry office tower, not simply a random bit of English countryside. Tempestes ignes. Moody roared, and his staff burned rose gold as the runes in it glowed and smoked, channeling too much power. The runes in the ground echoed those on the staff, and the ones that Moody's will created in the air. A storm of fire, a hurricane of flame that sucked at the air to the point it became hard to breathe, destroyed everything, including the soil to the depth of about 4 inches, as it raged for about 2 minutes, where a mushroom cloud of fire rose to the sky, and trees bent and broke in the howling wind that replaced all the oxygen burned in an inferno little different than a small nuclear device. A small square of land remained in the center of the storm, its outer 3 layers of wards having failed, but the inner ones having held. Its charms against detection had been stripped away in the firestorm, or overloaded temporarily to the point that the crumbling shack that had once been a 2-story manor house of the Tudor style was now visible. Before it on the ground were dozens of snakes, vipers of all kinds that rose and hissed their defiance and fury. Sirius, Narcissa, and Moody stepped forward and began chanting in Parseltongue, each of them working at different wards. Wards the master of this house had woven in magic. He knew without a doubt he was the last person in England who could speak. Voldemort never shared his gift. It was what made him special. The downfall of Slytherin's holy legacy was his own house's love of secrecy. The same gift given to a Hufflepuff, Harry Potter, had resulted in the almost forgotten legacy of Slytherin from again spreading through the great and soon-to-be great houses of wizarding Britain. Sirius was the most powerful, Alastair the most experienced, and Narcissa the most sensitive and subtle. Voldemort was the most powerful single Parselmouth to exist since Salazar Slytherin himself. He was not even close to powerful enough to stand against these 3 acting in concert, and the wards that he had woven had only their fixed strength and purpose, not a living mind to counter the forces pushing, pulling, weaving, and short-circuiting the fine network of interlocking power that warded the residents from intrusion. It fell in less than 10 minutes. Honestly, Narcissa was pacing herself for hours, but she had limited experience with parcel magic. That seemed easier than expected. Narcissa offered carefully. Sirius laughed and slapped her back. Yeah, that old-time snaky goodness really adds some oomph to the old spell slinging. Narcissa winced. I have to keep reminding myself you are a functional adult, lord of the Wizargamot, and leader of this mission. I keep fighting the urge to ground you and assign etiquette and behavior homework. Sirius chose to rise above this remark. Basilisk cavalry charge. Go forth and snack upon the forces of darkness, for they are full of evil and vitamins. A few dozen vipers slithered forth from Voldemort's final redoubt to defend the ancestral manor of the heir of Slytherin. 3 juvenile basilisks slithered to the charge, and when they rose, eyes open and blazing, the remaining serpents fell stiff and lifeless. Humming happily, Sirius stowed them in his storage bag. Petrified, they keep better that way. Good job, girls. Sirius chortled. He then shot a glance at Narcissa. And you thought I was a bad influence on our basilisk. Turning to BG, he hissed. Who's my best girl? BG stood upright and struck, burrowing her head into Sirius' side, hissing. BG is best girl. Narcissa shared a long, suffering glance with Estheno. She stroked the basilisk gently. Darla, do not listen to the dog, father. He is a leg-humping idiot, even if a fine wizard and warlord. You are a serpent of breeding and culture, and your deportment reflects on your lineage, which goes back on both sides to the most ancient and honored lines. Estheno hissed quietly. The venomed one is wise. That black-spotted one is mine. It smelled tastiest, and I got it first. Narcissa stalked over and pulled the indicated snake from Sirius' grasp with a glower, then hissed back to her basilisk. You are a black, Estheno. Never forget, we always get what is owed us. Moody and Constance were at the front door, hissing at each other, before Moody simply levitated her through the window to deal with what she sensed inside. A few minutes later, Moody splashed a potion on the door and let it slowly dissolve before stepping through. It was the work of minutes to unwind the wards around the boards in the floor. The only warded section of floor actually sped up finding the hiding place, thanks to Alastair's eye. That is the nastiest curse I think I have ever felt. Even knowing it is cursed, I really want to put on the ring. Moody laughed happily as he trapped the hovering ring inside a warded box, that he put inside another warded box, that he put inside a warded chest. Sirius looked at the chest and felt the roiling coils of serpents in his mind finally relax. The occlumency of his parcel magic had never been tested strongly before. Sirius wiped the sweat from his face. Do you remember how I said we could handle this ourselves? No need to involve the kids. Sirius said slowly. Moody growled. And I said these are too bloody dangerous to mess with outside a full ritual circle with Harry and those little monster friends he keeps picking up. Sirius winced, then grinned. I may, just may mind you, have changed my mind. I don't think I want to attempt that one without Harry and his full inner circle, and as big of an outer circle to contain it as I can beg, borrow, or steal. I figure Hogwarts, because if we do it inside the wards, chances of old Valdi feeling it are lower. Sirius said. Narcissa leaned down to Estheno and hissed. Darla, see Estheno, even Dogfather can learn new tricks. Moody nodded. That curse, the one that wants you to put it on, I barely was able to hold it off, and I'm about the most experienced this side of Dumbledore. There is a magic in that damned ring that is unlike the other Horcrux, something that seeps past the shields. I don't know how we are going to get past that put me on compulsion long enough to cleanse the ring. Sirius shrugged. The kids have been doing all right so far. We will just leave it to them. I trust their instincts. He thought for a second. This one is Voldemort's frigging house ring. I don't care if we just have all the basilisk kids get together and spit on it until it dissolves and Valdi comes scooting out to avoid the burn. We don't really need to be careful this time. Sirius closed his eyes. Still, that magic, the bit that you can't block out, I swear I know it. I swear I can remember its feel, like on my physical skin before. I swear to Merlin, I have never even seen that ring before, but I swear I know that magic like the back of my hand. Had Dumbledore been there, he might have been able to shed light on that familiarity. Dumbledore and Grindelwald had spent their youth researching and chasing the Deathly Hallows, and Dumbledore came to understand the Potter invisibility cloak was one of them. Sirius had pranked enough under its cover to know the touch of its magic intimately. Perhaps more than Dumbledore or Voldemort, Sirius recognized instinctively the touch of another deathly hallow, the resurrection stone set into the gaunt family ring as its crest. Since Dumbledore had chosen, as always, to keep secret from his closest allies the truth about their own tools and weapons, he had never shared with the Potters or Blacks the nature of the Potter family cloak. That the holder of the Elder Wand was about to have all three Deathly Hallows present in his own school would remain a secret from Dumbledore, not because anyone thought to keep it from him, but because he never gave them enough information to know that all three pieces of a power that was beyond Voldemort or Dumbledore would be in Hogwarts if only someone knew to unite them. Everything has its cost in magic, even silence. October 30, the day before the Goblet of Fire champion selection. Sirius had owled with the good news, so Harry had contacted Professor Sprout, who had activated whatever sort of witch wireless handled the hay we are gathering on Samhain night to practice forbidden rituals, dance around the fire, kill a bit of the Dark Lord's soul, and it's pot luck. This had left Harry with a conundrum. Hogwarts was essential to the defense of Britain, which Harry had accepted had fallen to his clan. His clan, human, goblin, viper, basilisk, united in common cause to not only defend the magical peoples of Britain from Voldemort, but to rebuild a better society than the corrupt and slowly dying one they had now. He had restored the Hufflepuff Cup to Professor Sprout, and the Amulet of Slytherin to Professor Snape. Two of the sacred four objects of Hogwarts were restored, and given to those he trusted to actually defend it, but they were outside the clan. Could he afford it? The foundation of the blood purist's political power had always been political marriage, for magic, and the ancient families respected ties of blood and power beyond any sort of lesser treaty or pledge. He would not bind anyone through marriage. He loved his freedom too much to ask to buy or sell another person into bondage simply to bind two houses. Yet the Goblin way, an existing Goblin clan, was different. It worked much like a noble house did as far as birth, marriage, and adoption being the paths into membership. But Goblin law was different for clan founding. In a clan founding, a clan lord chose, and a clan lady marked those whom they would bind to the clan as founding members. All of those would give their blood and magic to the clan. All of those would share in the blood and magic of the clan. With goblins, the level of magic on an individual level was a lot smaller than a fully trained witch or wizard. But collectively, as the Goblin Wars had shown, they could get awfully close to matching the best the wizarding world could send against them. Harry had been building his clan, weaving goblin, witch, wizard, rock viper, basilisk, all without care for any consideration other than will they stand with me, and will they respect all the others who do? Was it time to reach upwards, rather than just across to his own family and friends? Should he bring in Professor Sprout and Professor Snape? His instincts told him that returning the founders' gifts to their house members was half a bond, and his work was not done. He could not choose. He was not alone. He was Hufflepuff. They didn't make these kids of decisions alone. He sent his patroness to Hermione in the girls' dorm. Hermione, I think we need to grab Neville and Mill and meet with Professor Sprout and Snape about joining clan and coven. Harry had said it, and once his patroness slithered off through the walls to Hermione and Noodle where one revised and the other napped, it felt right. He shot off another one to Millicent. Millie, I think you need to grab Professor Snape and bring him to Professor Sprout's office. It is time we bring them all the way in. Clan and coven. Professor Snape regretted many of his life choices. Becoming a Death Eater was one. Calling Lilly Potter a mudblood in 5th year was another. Revealing Sybil Trelawney's prophecy to the Dark Lord was a third. But the one that weighed upon his will to live the most was assigning his Gryffindor 4th years a 2-foot parchment essay on preparation and uses of mandrake root. Ronald Weasley came from a line that had produced genius like William and Charles, had produced talented plotters and pedants like Percy, underachieving and misdirected menaces like Fred and George, and quietly brilliant witches like Geneva. Severus' own love life was somewhat more desolate than the high Arctic in midwinter, but he understood the theory well enough to realize that the odds of anyone seducing Molly Weasley from out from under Arthur, where she presumably spent a great deal of time considering the vast number of Weasleys, was vanishingly small, so Ronald should possess the same basic ability as the rest of his mannerless but talented ilk. Snape was considering the very real possibility of changelings. Ron Weasley could easily be some fairy's idea of a joke, the real Ronald Weasley living like a fairy prince beneath the mountain, while the cleverly transformed garden gnome made to look like a wizard was left in the cradle to fool the Weasleys and eventually write essays to torment one Severus Snape. Considering all the fairy nonsense going on right now, Severus was indeed considering it more possible than this essay was coherent. He scanned the essay on Mandrake, and a single random glance was already too much for his well-organized and disciplined scholar's mind. Well, it's a plant, right? But screams, so you got to put on earmuffs and stuff before you pull them out, or you can die or have Sprout go all mental and make you weed the herb garden in detention. You can't just use a stunner, or the mandrake explode, Sprout will go spare, and then you end up in the hospital ward wondering how a trowel got up there in the first place, and you have no idea how painful it is when they pull it out again. Snape would almost rather share a cup of coffee with Sirius Black than read another inch of Weasley wisdom, but he was spared from that by a knock on his door. Flicking his wand to drop the wards and open the door, he raised one eyebrow slowly for effect so his Slytherin could understand how important her answers to his next questions were for her future health and happiness. Miss Bulstrode, I trust you have a good reason for being out after curfew. I note that you are a fourth year, and while a candidate for fifth-year prefect next year, you are not one now. Snape drawled casually, dropping Weasley's essay with some relief. Millicent Bulstrode had come to his house, a thuggish-looking girl with a perpetual scowl who looked like a somewhat better carved copy of Crabbe or Goyle. She had flowered to become a witch of both power and intellect, an Amazonian figure that in no way fit the Slytherin aesthetic of delicate blossoms, being a brutal double-headed battle axe in a forest of delicate rapiers. Yet her confidence and undoubted grace gave her a compelling power that arrested the male eye in a way few of the well-bred and pampered young ladies of his house could equal. Power was attractive, ambition was attractive, ruthlessness was attractive, and in a house where status and standing was a game that consumed 90% of everyone's energy and effort, someone who honestly could not care less what her lessers thought of her was irresistibly attractive. With a wicked smile and hooded smoky glance that could have come from a film noir starlet, Millicent answered back inscrutably. Good reasons I do not have. I come with a poisoned chalice filled with temptation and power. I come with secrets freely offered that will put you beyond the laws of the land and beyond the power of its enforcers. I come to you with the wickedest of all possible offerings, knowledge the Dark Lord would keep for himself, and knowledge the Dark Lord dare not even look upon. Severus Snape looked upon a 14-year-old girl built more like a Muggle rugby star than model, and felt the lust rising within him. Not for her body, but for that promised poisoned chalice of temptation and power. A lesser person would offer the power, tempt with its benefits, and lie or at least conceal its risks and costs until you were safely bound. Severus felt his left forearm itch as he remembered being young, angry, and stupid enough to fall for that trap. Millicent Bulstrode told him the cup was poison, then whispered of its power. If he took it up, he would have the protection of neither Dumbledore nor Voldemort and would not need it. He rose silently, and she stopped smiling. We go to Professor Sprout's office, and my clan and coven would make you an offer. Snape was no fool. He did the math in a moment and knew what she was offering. Ritual magic was forbidden, as was goblin magic. Lily Evans, whose fall he had been an unwitting and unwilling cause of, had used ritual magic to strike down Hid Dark Lord on the precipice of his victory, and the combination of ritual and goblin magic had let the Potter brat beat him again and again. Did the spy want to step out of the shadows? Did the tool wish to step forward and fight for himself? You will know and speak the Founder's tongue, as will every child you sire. Millicent hissed in the parcel magic that had so impressed Severus in his youth that he signed his life and soul away to its speaker. What did you say? He asked softly, the question dragged unwilling from him. Millicent smiled. I made you a promise, and if you follow me, you will understand it too. Severus Snape found himself following the least angelic-looking child in the entire castle of Hogwarts, Yet if he was to be honest, she was the perfect serpent to lead him into temptation. Let others follow lust for flesh, for gold or domination. Severus Snape lusted for knowledge, especially that knowledge that was forbidden to others. Office of Pomona Sprout, head of Hufflepuff, hearing a knock at her door, she wandlessly flicked it open and sang out, "Come in, come in." Spare me from correcting herbology newt students who think word salad is a food I value. Look at me. Do I look like salads appeal to me? The round woman chuckled merrily, seeing three of her favorite badgers walk in: Neville Longbottom, Harry Potter, and Hermione Granger. Professor Sprout smiled and asked, "Oh, you look very serious, don't you? Why don't you explain the problem and then what you need from me?" Hermione tried. She really did. But after about 5 minutes of Harry attempting to explain Voldemort, Horcrux, politics, war, goblin law, economic theory, and the seventh time that he went off topic for unnecessary background information, Hermione took charge. Harry Potter got the school basilisk pregnant. There are 40 babies slithering here and there under the castle, and in various manners, with no more adult supervision than Harry here, and Sirius Black. We need you to join our clan so you can speak to snakes and provide some sort of parental supervision. Also, we are killing Voldemort. Rather farther along than we thought, but it's pretty much what we all came together to do. Professor Sprout frowned. I see I am going to have to get together with Hagrid to expand my sex education and birth control charm course to cast a rather wider net than I expected. I thank you for bringing this to my attention, Miss Granger. 10 points to Hufflepuff. Mr. Potter, I hope you're taking responsibility for mother and children. I obviously would be more than happy to join your clan and coven to see that all Hogwarts children, even the slithery ones, are properly educated. Sirius Black, as a parent, I shudder to think. At that point, Severus Snape slinked in, following a beaming Millicent Bulstrode as if slightly embarrassed to be there. Ah, Severus, how perfect. I was just going to message you. Rather think I am going to need your help in this, all things considered, sort of as much in your wheelhouse as mine. Pomona Sprout offered cheerfully, and Severus Snape eyed the clearly comfortable Hufflepuff house mistress and wondered how he had missed the strong current of madness that had clearly been running unnoticed through Hufflepuff his entire career. Severus asked softly, "When do we do this?" Harry smiled sadly. "We will need Mom for this. Samhain night, tomorrow, the easiest day to reach her. We will do the ritual after the feast, where they announce the poor sacrificial idiots for the cauldron of Dagda." Only Professor Sprout and Millicent Bulstrode could see Professor Snape wince and mouth the word Lily silently. 53. Chapter 53, Halloween and Champions. Harry Potter was scowling. Hermione called him on it. "Harry, you are scowling again. I can't believe I am forced to attend this stupid feast just for Dumbledore's ego." Harry snarled, glaring at the garish pumpkins surrounding the great hall, their leering faces making it appear like a muggle version of Halloween spooky. Hermione looked at the great hall, then pointed to the first and second years who were laughing and giggling. "Look, the little kids are really enjoying the Halloween festivities. I have never seen so many so happy." Neville fingered his beater bat. The cold iron bands around the stout oak were battered, scarred, and very real. Hermione had eyed him askance for wearing it openly at his belt, not concealed within the spatial expansion pouches, but Neville looked nervous as a cat in a room full of rocking chairs. So many happy, laughing children. Honestly, Hermione, count the bloody things. Neville said, looking nervous and clearly sweating. Hermione counted, then frowned. Did we invite extra guests? Hermione wondered, noting all the first and second years in their garish costumes, and realizing there were about twice again as many as there should be. Harry Potter slammed his goblin silver dagger deep into the oak of the table and snarled like a feral beast, the rage making his green eyes blaze unnaturally. "No, Hermione, we did not. Dumbledore did. For all that, Dumbledore has forbidden the old rites and denied any instruction of the old ways. The rules and the magic of the ancestors still rule the holy tides. Dumbledore just made sure all of us are ignorant as muggles about them. This is Samhain night. The veil between the real and the unreal has never been so thin. The veil between the living and the dead may, as well, not even exist with this much fairy magic pouring out of the cauldron of Dagda sitting right in the middle of the hall." Hermione looked over to the Ravenclaw table and noticed Myrtle Warren and Luna Lovegood giggling and feeding each other forkfuls of pumpkin pie with improbable amounts of whipped cream. Myrtle smiled happily, with a dollop of whipped cream sitting on the tip of her nose from Luna's more enthusiastic than accurate attempts to feed her. Hermione blinked. "Is that Moaning Myrtle, the ghost from the second-floor girls' loo? You know, the one from the Chamber of Secrets entrance?" Neville fingered his beater bat and nodded. "In the flesh for one night only." He smiled wanly, his attempt at humor failing to move even him. Hermione began to object. "Isn't she dead? I mean, she is dead, and I know we can't touch her, can't even really affect her with magic. How is Luna feeding her pie? How can she have pie? This can't be real." Harry snarled again. "It isn't real, Hermione, don't you get it? Tonight that doesn't matter. The real and the unreal, the living and the dead. On Sour Night the veil between them grows so very thin that the old rites treat this as one of the most powerful and sacred nights of the year, treated with reverence and ceremony, so that we give due honor and respect to those spirits, both of the dead and of the wild magic, who come to our doors this night. Our ancestors would greet them at the door and offer them gifts so that they would leave in peace." Hermione blinked again. "Trick or treating. Kids in costume come to the door and you give them candy." Neville shrugged. "Sure, kids won't be harmed by that which walks this night, because kids surrender to the wild, surrender to the unreal and just follow along. They dance to whatever tune the fairies play, follow the rules of whatever games because it's fun. And because for Sour Night, those that follow the rules are safe, because greater powers, even than the fairies, set the rules." The adults gave treats to whoever came to the door, because you couldn't be 100% sure it was a child shaking you down for a gift. It might be a fairy, a goblin, one of your own dead family members, or an angry guard checking to see you still feed the hungry that come to your door like your ancestors swore you would 10,000 years ago when they made bargains just to get through a starving winter. Harry muttered. "Of course, if you know the rules, you meet them at the door, give them a gift, and send them on their way. You don't let them past your threshold, you never invite them in, and you certainly don't set them up in the great hall inside every bloody ward meant to keep you safe." Hermione began to look around the hall in alarm. "So all those extra kids are fairy," Harry laughed. "Or dead. Hogwarts has never been safe. Old Dumbledore's strongest magic has always been propaganda. There are enough students who have died here that we all can name to fill a table, but if you search the Daily Prophet archives or Hogwarts a history, you won't find them. Even Moaning Myrtle over there only survives because the record of Hagrid's expulsion and Tom Riddle's award had to mention her. If they could have swept her all the way under the rug, we wouldn't even know about her." Hermione shuddered. "I always thought you didn't come to the feast because it was the anniversary of your parents' death." "I didn't know it was because you had a cultural or religious objection to Dumbledore's Muggle Halloween." Neville looked at her in surprise. "You do remember the troll from first year, right? 12 feet tall, stank of poo, tried to murder you in the bathroom. Halloween didn't just kill his parents, it has been actively trying to kill us every year we have been here. Samhain didn't become less dark and powerful because Dumbledore and the Ministry are trying to wipe out all of our ancient culture, stealing from you Muggle-borns something you don't even know you lost. It just meant that when terrible things happened because we broke rules no one taught us, kids died surprised." Hermione eyed the goblet of fire, now revealed as the cauldron of Dagda, the cauldron of brave deeds, and shuddered. She didn't need to take divination to know that Dumbledore's choice to have the champion selected on Sour Night, his precious Muggle Halloween, was a bad idea. As if that thought was a signal, a beaming Albus Dumbledore in purple robes, with flaming jack-o'-lanterns floating about on the fabric laughing, as if to a joke only they hear, stood and strode to the center of the hall. He gestured as if in summoning, but it was neither spell nor demon he summoned, but a group of reporters and photographers to record this shining moment of the Ministry of Magic's planning. "If I may have your attention. Tonight, students of Hogwarts, of Beauxbatons, of Durmstrang, we come together to celebrate the once-in-a-lifetime opportunity that our joint ministries of magic have offered you lucky students. A chance to compete in the Triwizards Tournament for not only the honor and glory of demonstrating which is the greatest school of witchcraft and wizardry in all of Europe, but who among all of you is the champion worthy of eternal glory and 1,000 galleons. The great hall roared with enthusiasm, for terrible ideas and bad decisions almost always are greeted thus. Dumbledore's face was a mask of elation as he drank in the cheers as if they were fine wine. On the head table, Phileas Flitwick looked tired and worried. Severus Snape sneered in towering contempt. Minerva McGonagall's eyes swept endlessly over her house table as if terrified she would lose a student if she stopped. And Pomona Sprout, the ever-cheerful Hufflepuff house leader, simply looked sad. As each champion's names are called, they will walk past the head table and walk with your headmaster or headmistress to the press room at the end of the hall for your briefing with the Ministry of Magic officials as to your first task, and for your first introduction to the press as Triwizard champions. Dumbledore cheered. With a flick of his wrist, Dumbledore produced the Elder Wand, the Death Stick, the first and most terrible of the Deathly Hallows, and as if this was a wise idea, used it to strike the cauldron of Dagda with a bolt of pure power and cause it to ring like a bell and give forth its chosen. The cauldron tolled like a bell, deep and chilling, causing a susurrus of fear to wash around the hall, a wash of cold like the hand of a corpse trailing down the spine of each and every cheering student as the first name came forth. A gout of blood-red fire shot from the corpse's pale flames that danced over the goblet of fire, and a smoking piece of parchment landed in Dumbledore's hand. With a smirk, he read the first name. The first champion from Beauxbaton Academy, Fleur Delacour. Dumbledore shouted, and the whole hall roared its appreciation. Those who noted that the Beauxbaton table barely even clapped for their Vila champion could be forgiven their surprise. The unparalleled French beauty drew thunderous applause from the rest of the student body. With poise and grace that any pure blood would kill to match, Fleur strode to the head table, turned and curtsied to the crowd, before following her giant headmistress to the room at the end of the hall. As the applause died down, Dumbledore smiled as the goblet flared scarlet a second time, and a second flaming bit of parchment came out. Dumbledore read the name and boomed out. The champion for Durmstrang is Victor Crumb. This time the entire hall rang with not only applause, but starting from the Gryffindor Quidditch fanatics and spreading throughout the hall came the chant, Crumb, Crumb, Crumb. If the cheers moved him at all, he did not show it. Shrugging off his heavy cloak, the well-muscled boy marched like a soldier on parade to the head table, gave a precise right wheel, and marched to the end door, sparing neither cheering hall nor simpering headmaster a glance. Dumbledore was beaming now, ready for Hogwarts' moment to be the final, and thus most remembered of the champion selections. The goblet of fire spat out another flaming comet of parchment. Dumbledore snatched it from the air, and his voice rang out again like a trumpet. Finally, our last, and if I may be so bold, best champion, the Hogwarts champion, is Cedric Diggory. The hall exploded in cheers, for the golden boy of Hufflepuff was loved by many, respected by all, and hated by none. He really was all the virtues of Hufflepuff, a wizard of power and skill, a leader, a mentor to his youngers, one of the best seekers in recent history, and one of the best-looking boys in the upper years. Blushing as if embarrassed by the applause, Cedric walked to the front of the great hall, nodded to the headmaster, and walked to the room at the end of the hall with the champions and the press. Minister for Magic Bartimus Crouch Sr. walked past him, his eyes bright and almost feverish. He walked to stand beside a confused Albus Dumbledore, who had turned to ask the minister why he had left the champion's room when the goblet flared again, and a fourth scrap of parchment landed in Dumbledore's hand. The room fell silent, save for the one shout from the Ravenclaw table, where Luna Lovegood's eyes had gone wide and terrified. Her shout of "Oh, bugger!" was the only sound heard before a shaken headmaster Dumbledore read softly a fourth and final name. The champion of the Goblin Nation, Harry Potter. A chorus of shock and outrage ran around the room, starting from his own Hufflepuff table. Harry stood up, strode to the middle of the floor, and refused to advance to the headmaster. "I refuse," he shouted. "It is a binding magical contract. You cannot refuse. Your life and magic are forfeit if you do," shouted back the Minister of Magic, his eyes bright, as he licked his lips and trembled in the grips of some emotion that no one could identify. Harry Potter drew upon his magic, calling upon all of his power. The light in the hall darkened until the only light that seemed to exist was the blue corpse flame from the cauldron of brave deeds and the reflected burning light of Harry Potter's curse scar. The goblin silver of its Suelo rune blazed with burning and terrible blue light as Harry Potter put his will against the cauldron of Dagda. "I will not," Harry Potter shouted, but the cauldron tolled again, and chains of blue flame shot from it and lanced into his flesh with bright hooks. Harry screamed as it dragged him forward, and with each step he was dragged forward, a shining ghost in blue corpse flame stepped from the cauldron. Step by step, as he was dragged forward, another ghost stepped from the cauldron. Their robes were old and strange, some Hogwarts, some Durmstrang, some Beauxbaton. They bore the wounds of their death, their eyes hollow, their faces sad, for they were the souls of those who had been bound to the goblet, those who had taken up the challenge and fallen in the doing. Bound and damned forever to the goblet of fire. Harry screamed as he was dragged before the goblet of fire, a kneeling figure surrounded by those older, wiser, stronger than him who had taken up this challenge for hundreds of years before and died. The voice of Minister of Magic Bartimus Crouch rang like a sentencing judge. "It is a binding magical contract, Mr. Potter. You have no choice." Harry Potter looked up at the tall, thin man, and of all the hall, only he could see the wide, mad grin upon the generally stoic and humorless minister's face. Dumbledore stood shaken, as if from a trance, and staggered over to Harry where he knelt. He helped the boy to his feet, noting the blood running down arms and chest where the hooks from the cauldron's flaming chains had pierced the boy, and the tears running down his face, and the headmaster winced. "Forgive me, Harry, but the minister is correct. The time for choice is past. Your name has been pulled from the goblet. You are bound to compete or lose your magic at a minimum." The headmaster looked at the empty-eyed ghosts of fallen champions, each connected to the cauldron of Dagda by the chains of their selection, and shuddered. "Or your life." Ludo Bagman, head of the Department of Magical Sport, was holding court with the three champions describing the nature of the tasks and the various public relations obligations of the champions through the long months of the tournament itself when the door opened again, and a bloody boy staggered in, wounds in both wrists and shoulders where the meat hooks of the fairy chains had bound him still oozing blood. Fleur shot to her feet, wand out. "This child has been hurt." Harry found himself on the ground, and her wand already casting diagnostic and medical charms with the precision, if not speed, of a trained mediwitch. She hissed, "These wounds, they are cursed. I cannot close them. I must seal them, or you will continue to bleed. Forgive me, child, but this will scar you." Fleur whispered, eyes troubled. She began chanting. He did not speak French, and the French she chanted in had not been spoken since the Middle Ages, so he could be forgiven for not understanding the words. Harry screamed again, though as conjured silk threat began to weave itself into his flesh and pull his weeping wounds shut, stopping the bleeding. Gruffly, Crumb dropped to his knees by Harry's head and in slightly accented English proffered a vial of foul-smelling potion. "Drink this. It is blood replenishment, and a few extras. Keeps you in the fight and not die afterwards. I brew it myself, so trust it." Crumb said, and Harry drank the potion down. It burned like whiskey, but Harry's head began to clear as it did far more than just replace his lost blood. Whatever Crumb's potion was, it was a medical miracle and no small gift. Cedric Diggory was looking down in shock. "Harry, what the hell, Harry, what happened?" Headmaster Karkaroff sneered at the Hogwarts champion. "You know this boy." Diggory snapped back in irritation. "Of course I know him. He is one of my beaters." Diggory continued to Harry. "Harry, how did you get this torn up at the feast? You look like someone used you for target practice, and Fleur said the wounds are cursed." Fleur snapped in irritation as she wiped the blood off the closed and sutured wounds. "They are cursed. I cannot heal them or close them with magic. I have to weave the flesh back together with silk and let the body heal itself. That is dark magic that has no place in school. Your Hogwarts is a foul place to allow it to be used on children." Harry laughed softly, sounding broken and defeated. "What happened, Cedric, is I tried to say no to joining your little suicide club, and the Cauldron of Dagda decided it didn't want to let me." Dumbledore and Minister Crouch, still arguing, came through the door at that point. Dumbledore descended on Harry Potter like his totem phoenix, shouting at the boy and shaking him by the shoulders, pushing past Fleur and Crumb forcefully. Tell me you put your name in the goblet, Harry. Tell me the truth, and tell me now, Dumbledore demanded. Harry snarled back at his headmaster. Of course, I didn't put my name in your stupid suicide cup. I know what that cursed thing is. I am not binding my eternal soul to some fairy object for 1,000 galleons, and the chance to be the minister's pet propaganda tool. I am 14. Your own age line wouldn't let me past, and your own magic make it impossible for anyone else to use senile puppeteering child-murdering bastard. Dumbledore had the Elder Wand in his hand, the tip blazing like a star when Fleur de Lacquers shouted, Expelliarmus, snatched it from his hand. The question of whether or not the headmaster would have fired that spell at the helpless Potter ere was a matter of debate not settled for generations after. The French Vila looked at Dumbledore with horror, and her headmistress Maxime moved between Dumbledore and her student as a living barrier as her wand too was out. Fleur looked worried. You would strike your own student, a child. What does this little boy mean about someone putting his name in the cup? We already have your Hogwarts champion, and he is no little boy, Fleur said, thrusting her chin at Cedric Diggory, but keeping her wand on a Dumbledore clearly struggling to get his emotions under control. It was Minister for Magic Barty Crouch who said softly, However it happened, the Goblet of Fire spat out a fourth name, Harry Potter competing for the Goblin Nation. As we told all of you before you put your own names in, once chosen by the Goblet, that choosing constitutes a binding magical contract. You will compete and complete all 3 tasks, or lose your magic and your life. The argument lasted for over an hour. Only Rita Skeeter looked like she was enjoying the event. She knew, as any good reporter knew, that the picture of Beauxbaton's beautiful Fleur de Lacquer cradling the bleeding and broken boy who lived, and tending his wounds while Quidditch superstar Victor Crumb fed him life-saving potions wasn't just worth the front page. It was worth multiple reprints, and whole international flu transported pallets of papers for the European markets for whom this scandal and tragedy would take the Triwizard Tournament from the filler section of the sports page and onto the front page. There was no political blood in the water like actual blood. The blood of children, and the visual proof before the whole of Hogwarts that the Triwizard Tournament had been little more than a fairy trick to bind the souls of all the many champions killed, in competition for hundreds of years to the cauldron of Dagda, would end more than one political career. And Rita Skeeter had a front-row seat with dictation quill and photographer. How many most ancient and noble houses from across all of Europe would discover the fate of their best and brightest for the last 700 years? Such a trick, such a treat. It really was a happy Halloween for this reporter. Oh, her editors would not complain about her bill for rooming at Hogsmeade after this. There was no way Rita Skeeter would go farther from Hogwarts until the Triwizard Tournament was over. Near midnight, in the fields of Hogwarts beyond the Hufflepuff greenhouses, the Coven and Clan had been filtering in. Their movements may have been covered from casual observation, but after the events of the evening, observation was no longer casual. The headmaster was trapped in his office dealing with a lineup of flu visitors from the ministry, and from families too powerful politically, economically, and magically to ignore. Otherwise he might have been free to interfere. Sirius Black, Griphook, and Frithweaver had neither been quiet nor subtle when they braced the headmaster in his office, and observers from Durmstrang and Beauxbatons noted their entry and lack of exit. As Snape, Sprout, Moody, Lupin, and the students of the Clan and Coven filtered out past the greenhouses and out into the fields, followed by Sirius and Narcissa Black, Griphook, Frithweaver, Fangborn, and Glitterbright of Gringotts of the Goblin Nation moved back into the fields, 2 extra observers followed, each ignorant of the other. Victor Crumb slunk low through the grass. He did not follow them closely, for he could follow their scent. Long and lean, he wore his wolf form as naturally as he wore his own skin. Animagi and wolf, as his family had always been, he hunted this Harry Potter, this strange boy who claimed to be Goblin, who swore that he had not put his name in the goblet, yet had been chosen by it. He had not come to this far foreign place to lose. He would not be pawn or puppet for those whose money and favor he needed if he could become Triwizard champion. This was his chance to have a future of choices, where he had the freedom to ignore offers and not play until he found someone willing to put him on a team where he would not be the only player the enemy had to stop to win. A star seeker who was the only star on his team did not play long, often did not live long. A star seeker on a team that could be ignored was the only target for bludger and beater, was worth any number of penalty shots to be stuck by chasers in clear and obvious foul, because even a 3-shot penalty was better than letting him get the snitch. Victor knew his fate if he must take whatever offer he got out of school. He would be lucky to make 3 years uncrippled. No way would he survive long enough and become famous enough to write his own ticket as a free agent. He was too poor not to take what was offered, unless he won the Triwizard. The Triwizard money meant he could wait, and the Triwizard fame meant the best teams would be begging for him. Teams where their chasers were too good to ignore, where their beaters were fast enough to actually defend him. Teams where Victor Crumb could be a star and survive. This tournament was his future. Harry Potter was a mystery, an unpredictable element that could destroy his plans. Victor slunk through the wheat and barley fields, his wolf nose and ears guiding him towards what secrets he did not know, but must know. Fleur de Lacre moved silently. Her training in dance let her move like a ghost over the ground. Those who wrote of her background assumed she danced for the same reason she trained in all the maidenly arts expected of a pure-blood woman, which she was only technically and not quite legally. No, she trained in dance for the same reason she trained in arithmancy and magical theory. It made her a better duelist. Fleur de Lacre was a Vila. You could call her a half Vila or quarter Vila, but the French ministry had no illusions, Vila bred true. A girl child born of a Vila mother was a Vila, and a son was a human. She was a witch by law and by magic, but the ministry and society would never let anyone forget she was a Vila, a magical creature. Human enough to breed with, and beautiful beyond measure, but not quite human enough to be anything but a bed warmer. Welcome to appear on the arm of the powerful at any event, but never allowed at the table of the powerful as a member. The Triwizard tournament was her chance. Had anyone but Madame Maxime been headmistress, she would never have been allowed the chance. Sure, every boy at school wanted to date her or marry her, but the idea that the Vila girl should be Beauxbaton's champion, let alone Triwizard champion, and stand above all the pure-blooded, real witches and wizards did not bear thinking about. Madame Maxime's own giant blood had left her with scant tolerance for pure blood prejudice. She took the best and brightest from her school, and if one of them was the Vila girl, then so be it. Vila had gifts with charm and fire. Everyone knew that meant that Vila had their allure, the gift that drew men, and no small number of women, to chase after them. They knew that Vila could generate and hurl fire. What they ignored is that was the untrained basic skill of a magical race. Vila had a gift with charms and fire, and Vila were half human. A Vila given the gift of witch magic came to her wand with an instinctive knowledge of charms, an affinity for fire. Given the intelligence and drive of Fleur de Lacre, this meant she could train herself to be the equivalent of a charms master while still in school, and that mastery she showed now. Wrapped in invisibility, she drifted along the ground, following the people being so very discreet, and secret slipping out into the fields on Samhain night, following their mysterious boy who lived. It can be no accident that Harry Potter's name came from the goblet of fire, the cauldron of Dagda. She was no fool. They called him Goblin Champion, and she followed 4 goblins out through the fields, walking with no less than 2 of the Hogwarts head of house. Triwizard Champion would be Fleur de Lacre's ticket out of Pretty Vila and into most powerful witch in the world. This was her chance to shatter the glass ceiling and write her own future, a future built on who Fleur de Lacre was and what she could do, not simply what she was born. Whatever Harry Potter was or was doing this night could take that away. She had to know. Unseen and unsuspected, she would know this night. Moody's eye was rolling so madly it was beginning to give him a headache. I don't like this serious. There are 1,000 terrible things awake and hungry tonight. Not all of them are real, and not all of them aren't letting them stop them. I haven't seen this much fairy activity since that idiot Grey and his bloody painting. I lost auras on that one, and it wasn't a tenth as mad as tonight, and nowhere near Samhain night. The aura paused, shuddered, and reduced the sensitivity of his magical eye to a level his sanity could stand. I don't like this at all serious. A pack of werewolves or a giant could be within touching distance before we knew about it. Dumbledore could be riding a broom on the perimeter right now, and the magic is so wild and thick I wouldn't notice him until he started casting. I want our strongest on the perimeter. Voldemort may not be the wickedest thing walking tonight. Mad-Eye Moody snarled as he stumped over to the stone he would use as his seat and pulled his massive drum from a pouch far too small to hold it. A small blonde shape, wearing what looked like leaves and lichen, feet bare as her flanks, and a crown of wildflowers in her hair, grabbed the paranoid aura from behind in a surprise hug no other living being would have dared, and no few dead ones could explain why. Luna Lovegood hugged Mad-Eye carelessly. No need, no need. The Wild sings tonight, and I have asked them to dance with me. I will ward with my friends, and all the Wild will dance with us. Merlin's bloody balls, shouted Mad-Eye Moody as Luna released him from her hug and smiled at him, her eyes focused on something he could not see, and prayed to every goddess of bloody altar he never would. Drum for us, Alistair, so we may dance. Luna commanded, and the assembled heads of house, the retired senior aura and several lords of ancient and noble house heard her command and bowed to it. Luna began to dance the outer perimeter, Mad-Eye giving himself to the wild pulse of the magic of the night, where the real bowed to the unreal, the dead, as likely to call the living, as the living to call the dead, and where the magic of the land ran wild in memory of a time before men and wands and rules. Neville Longbottom was a humble boy, growing into a very solid young man, and he was perhaps the most Hufflepuff of Hufflepuffs. He felt the madness, the chaos, the howling hunger of nature red in tooth and claw, the endless hunger of unreality, chained by the act of creation into a prison. It yearned only to tear down into the primordial state of endless possibility and reach down to create a place of safety. Through the madness and whirl of the dance that clawed at the minds of the ritualists, they heard the voice of a boy, slow and steady. I call upon the guardians of the watchtowers of the north, to the earth, to the mother from whom we are all born, and to whom we all return. Set this place apart from the madness and dangers of beyond, seal and sanctify it to our purpose. 2 rows of thorns rose from the ground, one outside Luna and the dancers she led, and one inside. The dancers behind Luna gave voice to 100 calls, from the laughter of Sprite and Spriggan, the snarl, cackle, and cawing of the endlessly shape-changing puka that followed, the deep belling laughter of the cow-tailed hollow-backed tree women, the huldra, and the delicate, too perfect laughter of fairy ladies in gowns of gossamer and pale lords in mail of silver. Millicent called upon the waters of the west, the ice that was before and will be when the last invading star has died, and the outer ring of thorns grew white with frost, so cold that the earth for a dozen meters beyond it froze white with frost, and gave rise to fog that sought to block eyes from seeing what passed within. Hermione called upon the fire of the south, and the inner thorn ring burst into flames that threw off heat enough to make the inner circle like a midsummer night. Finally Harry called to the watchtowers of the east, to the guardians of the sky to seal and sanctify their rights, that no ill thing should be permitted to pass their wards to threaten the outer world. If any watchers had any doubts about the strangeness of the rite, the sealing of evil within, not without banished them. These wards would bar 100 auras from breaking this circle without a matching ritual or complex ward cascade of their own to equal it. Yet it was focused not to bar evil from entering, but from leaving. Of course, Luna Lovegood was leading the dance of creatures of wild, an ancient fairy in the outer ring, and none of the wise would think to cross those pale lords and ladies of the ancient race on Samhain night, without an army and holy cause worth their lives to challenge. Hermione and Fangborn stepped forward, and above their hands flashed needles of goblin silver, dancing to mirror the fairy madness outside the circle. Hermione's voice rang clear and strong, her body limed with flames that licked from her flesh but burned her not. Who comes to the coven, who comes to the clan, who pledges their blood, their lives, their sacred magics to the cause and cleansing of this world? Pomona Sprout and Severus Snape stepped forward and knelt before her. Without thought, they opened their robes and knelt bare-chested before woman and goblin, and as both inner and outer circles danced to the wild magics of the Samhain night, the needles danced in skin and flesh, as power and duty were woven in flesh and soul, the lightest of the markings being the runes marking their flesh. Athala and Algiz, family and protection, bound them to the clan and coven, while the third rune showed their nature and soul, what they brought to the coven and clan. Professor Sprout bore the mark of Fehu between her breasts, the mark of wealth, abundance, security, fertility. Head of Hufflepuff House and mistress of herbology, her soul was tied to the earth and to the children, giving her life to creating and maintaining a safe space for them to grow and become, even as her arts provide for their sustenance and the wealth to make Hogwarts sustainable. Severus Snape bore the mark of Hagalaz above his heart. If Fehu is the wealth of the fields, Hagalaz or hail is its bane. Hagalaz is elemental destruction, wrath, testing, and overcoming obstacles. Hagalaz is dark and hated, yet necessary, and too often the only path to salvation. The Eater of Death felt the new marks in his flesh and soul war with the dark mark in his forearm, and all the deeds he had done under it, and felt his magic go to war within himself. As Professor Sprout rose laughing in joy at the power that stirred and burned within herself, Professor Snape staggered, blood weeping from the self-inflicted wound of his dark mark and the oaths bound to it. Noodle slithered to the center of the inner circle, there to rise and sway before the chest sitting on the bare earth, one whose foulness reached out, even through the triple-warded containers that could not fully bind it. It was time. Harry cast the charms with a flick of his wand, and the three containers opened in sequence. The ring within rose into the night, and the moonlight wrapped around it in unholy fire, its song suddenly weaving into and through the dance of the witches and wizards with a song and call of its own. Sickly sweet the call to power and immortality, the challenge to take up the ring, to grasp the power of life beyond death. Power beyond reason sang out on the night where the dead were less than a whisper away, and where reality strained and groaned against the pull of the madness before creation. Although the drummer stayed lost to the beat of the power of the earth beyond the circle, and Luna and the fairy of the outer ring did not stop or slow in their dance, for theirs was always an existence balanced on the knife edge of madness and temptation. Those merely human and goblin of the inner circle faltered in their dance, and wavered for a moment as the temptation flowered in their mind, and flowed into their blood like so much sweet, tempting liquor. Noodle flashed forward, his fangs striking, his mind striking, and inside every mind of the circle the touch of his burning venom tore the sweet temptation of power and immortality as the bitter venom of mortal flesh, and pain and death burned into their minds and into their magics. Where the song of the ring and its stone had been, now their minds only held the dark of scale and flash of fang. Millicent Bulstrode snarled as she stepped forward, her wand stabbed like a spear as she drove her will, her rune and her rage into the magics of the ring. "Issa," she hissed, and the stillness of the cold before the first fire drove into the ring, stilling the runes and enchantments of its binding. With the ponderousness of a mountain falling, Neville Longbottom stepped forward, and from his wand the golden sickle of Jira flashed, and he spoke its name, and he gave the stroke of the Reaper to sever the connections between soul and flesh. Jira, he spoke, as he struck. Hermione let the primal fires of creation, the purifying fire of the phoenix, fill her fingers as she held the ring and let the purifying flame destroy it. Kenaz, she spoke, as she gave primal fire to the gaunt family ring and the scrap of Voldemort's soul-bound Thurin. Voldemort rose from the ring screaming, "It this day of the dead." His soul fragment was so close to live that his magic clothed himself in living flesh to stand before his nemesis, wrapped in flesh and power as a will far beyond the merely human Tor power and existence from the madness of this most dangerous of nights. Harry Potter, hissed the Dark Lord, as he gathered his might for a test of magic that would not come. Harry Potter smiled, took his goblin silver knife, and cut his hand. Making the wand movements of Avada Kedavra, he splashed his own blood upon the newborn flesh of Voldemort in the same lightning shape of his scar. Speaking a single word, Harry Potter named the rune that had marked him since Voldemort's killing curse met his mother's sacrificial magic, and failed. "Swalo," Harry spoke, and Voldemort screamed, a golden and scarlet light growing from where the blood touched him. Harry continued speaking as if the Dark Lord's death meant nothing. You used it for the killing curse, because to you all that rune represented was power. That is what all the wand wizards since Merlin use it for. My mother taught me the other meanings of the rune, though Tam honor, victory, cleansing. Her honor, my victory, and of course, your cleansing. Zvaldemar fell in flames and screaming, another spirit rose. She was clad not in glory, nor magical wonders. She wore faded blue jeans and a green sweater. Her red hair was gathered in a pony tail with a simple muggle hair elastic. Her eyes were the green of the killing curse, and her face was too full of character to be conventional beautiful. Stepping forth, she cupped Harry's face in her hands and looked down at him and smiled. I am so very proud of you, Harry. I gave my life so that you could live. When the time comes, remember, I chose this price, and you have made me proud of what you have done with it. Do not falter at the end. Harry's eyes burned with tears, and he let them fall unashamed as his mother let him go and turned to walk away. Severus Snape lay where he had fallen, left arm outstretched to reach the side of his fallen Dark Lord. He looked up at her, and his voice was a broken thing. Lily. He spoke softly. Severus. She said flatly, then sighed. Your mistake cost 2 lives and 1 soul. The lives are already lost, and the soul is mine. He does not get yours. Do you hear me, Severus? He does not get yours. Lilly Potter reached down and grabbed Severus Snape's left arm and ripped the dark mark from it with claws of otherworldly rage. The darkness of the mark writhed and wriggled in her hands like serpents of pure foulness, and she raised them to her lips and devoured them. Her eyes shone like beacons of jade fire as she looked down on Severus Snape, and her voice was loud as thunder. I have forgiven you your debt to me, but not to my son. I have freed you from your obligation to the mark you chose in your rage. I leave it to you to decide how you will honor the marks you chose in your regret. With that, Lilly Potter turned to the stone that remained on the ground, looking at the resurrection stone that even phoenix fire could not destroy, and sighed. This is too much temptation for my son to carry. I have no right to ask it of you, but will you do it? Lily said, taking the most toxic of the deathly hallows into her undead hands and turning to Noodle. Dollar Speaker is mine to protect. Noodle said simply, then struck. Looking at her empty hands and the swallowing rock viper, she smiled sadly and turned to Herr Son. You are loved, and will be when I am gone. Remember that. Lily spoke, and with the speaking of the last word she was gone. As the circle fell, and a distracted group of humans and goblins began to talk about that most potent and strange ritual, in the darkness beyond, 2 champions stalked away into the night, headed to the Durmstrang ship and Beaubaton carriage, with much to think about. The Triwizard Tournament had begun, but it was far from the only game being played. 54. Chapter 54, Press and Pushback. Meet the Press. Rita Skeeter was ready for her interviews. The Triwizard Tournament was the scandal of the century. Not only were there 4 champions, but the fate of all those brave and noble champions who had fallen was revealed to be eternal soul enslavement to the ancient enemies of mankind. The wealthy and powerful of the wizarding world were discovering their precious family magic had been offered as a sacrifice by their own ministries, diminishing those families by an unknown degree with every fallen champion. The champions they had were the most touching group of heroes to paint as innocent victims in this tragedy. The brave and beautiful Villa girl battling against entrenched racism in French society. Honestly, any sin could be attributed to the French without invoking any English critical thinking about if they perhaps did the same or worse. It was always safe to blame the French. She really was heart-stopping beautiful, and if the French called her not quite human, the English could interpret this as not quite French, and thus safe to cheer and sympathize for and with. Victor Crumb was a half-blood boy whose rise to fame was legendary. Denied a place on his Durmstrang house team until a duel between prime and backup seekers resulted in 1 death and 1 expulsion, the boy had become the only undefeated seeker in Durmstrang history. Chosen as the backup seeker for the Bulgarian national team, he had taken over when the primary seeker refused to play during a dispute with the coach about being forced to the same physical training schedule as the chasers and beaters. This famously backfired when Victor Crumb set a record for fastest snitch catch in European League play against Spain. Crumb became a legend. Attempts by the prominent families to dig up dirt on the boy had the opposite effect, as Crumb had no vices. and his marks from Durmstrang were not inflated, but rather illegally lowered so as to not embarrass better-born and connected heirs who consistently finished far beneath Victor Krum in both academic and wand-based subjects. Victor Krum was the stoic hero, the self-made commoner who neither asked nor took any favors. Cedric Diggory was the Hufflepuff golden boy. House seeker and Quidditch captain, he had been prefect for 2 years and was openly considered a shoe-in for head boy next year. His father was Department of Control of Magical Creatures head, yet Diggory had made a public spectacle of refusing those opportunities his politically powerful and demanding father had opened for him. Quietly brilliant, he could have had everything handed to him, but refused and chose to make his slow and steady rise the Hufflepuff way, through hard work and the support of his admiring peers. There wasn't a single family from light, dark, or neutral factions that would not quietly assassinate any of their own children's contracted marriage partner if Cedric had even hinted interest at their daughter. Even Rita could find not a single which Cedric had been inappropriate with. His reputation as a gallant and charming young gentleman had witches from 5th year to 50 years old ready to slip some amortinia into his pumpkin juice to turn that charming boyish smile into a more lustful gaze. The last champion, Harry Potter, the boy who lived, was Dumbledore's famous answer to you-know-who, the one who defeated him from the very cradle, and the one who, as a boy, had made open war on the Death Eaters, making no secret of his intent to make those who took part in the murder of James and Lilly Potter face death by his wand, rather than any trial by the notoriously corruptible Wizigamot. To say Harry had been controversial was putting it mildly. The boy who lived that existed in the Ministry of Magic public statements and Dumbledore's frequent speeches did not match at all the Goblin raised, and according to some critics, Goblin corrupted and violence-prone boy who refused to follow the script the Ministry and Dumbledore both had for his role as savior of wizarding Britain. Rita started the day with the full intention of making a splash in her interviews. She had even used her influence, or terror she created, to browbeat the Ministry functionaries to drag the champions off into an unwitnessed broom closet for her interview. Close quarters, no witnesses, the implied intimacy of the broom closet. She expected to crack the teenagers with relative ease and get some truly scandalous headlines. It turns out dragging the most powerful Vila witch under 100 into a broom closet without warning is a great way to find out that you have bisexual tendencies, and that a Vila who is surprised by someone she does not trust can ramp that allure up to levels a stone golem with oculomancy would have trouble resisting. Rita was not at her best, and Fleur had a lifetime of dealing with people who had a very well-scripted place for her that she had no interest in living. Rita had to admit Fleur handled her like a junior league club reporter. That was fine. There were other champions, and her picture was certainly worth a cover anyway. Victor Krum had the second highest academic average in Durmstrang for his year, so he was clearly an intelligent and capable wizard. His English, when he spoke, was slightly accented but articulate. He spent words, however, like they were painted with a 2-foot brush in his own blood. He didn't answer every question with a single word. She was lucky to get a single word. Frequent a nod, shrug, headshake, or frown was all she received. He did not come off as stupid, so much as stoic in a way the ancient Spartans might have felt was a bit extreme. As a headline generator, Victor Krum made a good bludger. He was not going to give her a headline, just a headache. Cedric Diggory was a joy to interview. He was a duelist who enjoyed the duel, and he knew how to flirt. Indeed, his innocent face, quick blush, and gentlemanly double entendre made such a deadly combination that Rita found herself unable to stay on topic as she got too caught up in the game. Honestly, his father was a blunt instrument. Cedric's mother must be the world's greatest conversationalist, because Cedric did not get any of those genes or ability from his ugly and ill-tempered father. Cedric made good, even great copy, but not exactly a headline. He was too careful to risk offending anyone. Worse, he was so smooth at it, Rita couldn't even regret failing to trick him into saying something controversial. Harry Potter's interview was different. The only time she had been that terrified in an ambush interview was with Mad Eye Moody. She had actually turned in her letter of resignation to the prophet over that one. But the prophet had what it called the Moody policy, where no letter of resignation would be accepted within 3 days of an Alastair Moody interview. As a 14-year-old boy, Harry Potter should not have been capable of generating anything like the murderous Aura's aura. But within seconds of trapping Harry in the broom closet, she gained the distinct impression she was the one caught. So, Harry, what do you think your mother and father, bless their hearts, would say if they could see you now, a Tri-Wizard champion at 12 years old? Rita offered. It's 14, and my mother and father can be reached at Gringotts for comment. My birth mother and father fought and died in a war that mattered, a conflict worthy of the risk of their lives, the battle against that murdering racist psychopath Voldemort and the deranged rapists, torturers, and murderers who are proud to bear his slave brand. They would be deeply offended that the reward for their sacrifice is the ministry and Dumbledore choosing to risk my life to sell your papers and spread their lies dressed up as history. Do you want a quote, a headline from me? Fine. Harry snarled. Harry took a deep breath and faced Rita. His green eyes blazed, and he spoke with a depth of rage and contempt that had Rita pressing herself against the back wall. His green eyes shone, and the scar on his forehead blazed as his magic ran wild in the confined space, and pressed against her so powerfully that she feared he might accidentally blot her out without noticing. His words were captured by the swift dancing quick, quote, quill, even if she was too shaken to so much as twitch as he spoke. Ave hypocrite, filii tui morituari, salutant te. Since it is the goal of our educators and ministry to keep us all ignorant and controllable, I will translate. Hail hypocrites, your children who are about to die, salute you. Rita's photographer reflexively snapped the photo of Harry Potter, giving the ancient Roman gladiator's salute with his wand blazing in his fist. The boy who lived openly naming himself and his fellow champions nothing more than the modern version of the slaves who fought and died for the amusement of the rich of the Roman Empire. Well, that was going to be a headline. Dark Lord in detention, Barty Crouch Jr. had never really cared for his father as a disciplinarian. The fact the champion for zero tolerance for the dark arts had Barty Jr. as a son he sent to Azkaban for life pretty much summed up their relationship. Mother had loved him, and when she was dying had forced dear old Dad to bend his principles and swap dying Mom for living son. Dad's intention was that Barty spend his entire life locked in the basement, regretting his sins. Barty grinned. Now Dad was in the back garden at home being a tree, and Barty was killing time before he was allowed to go back to killing people by being dear old Dad for the public. Taking a sip of the polyjuice potion in his hip flask, he smirked at the superior look Senior Undersecretary Delors Umbridge shot the theoretical Minister for Magic for his secret daytime drinking. She would poop a pink dragon if she realized she was taking orders from one of the Dark Lord's inner circle of Death Eaters, which made it so much fun to have the self-righteous Toad commit Azkaban-worthy deeds to advance the Dark Lord's own agenda, all the while so sure she was standing up for everything just right and holy about her precious ministry for magic. Since there was nothing just right or holy about that corrupt den of incompetence, she was functionally correct. You've seen these headlines, Minister. The boy who lived is clearly mocking you and the very authority of the ministry. Dumbledore is just letting him get away with it. Umbridge fumed, puffing up like a toad about to explode from eating a firework disguised as a fly. Barty knew the Potter brat was due to be bled like a sacrificial pig for the Dark Lord's resurrection, then slaughtered by the magic and wand of the Dark Lord himself before the adoring eyes of all of wizarding Britain to announce his return. Still, while he couldn't kill the little twerp and couldn't do anything which would inhibit his ability to be properly heroic during the challenges, nothing said he couldn't indulge in a little of the old screaming sadism just to pass the time. Touring to the ministerial Toad, who was toadying so very, very hard, he put on his best impression of his father's stern face. You are so right, Delors. May I call you Delors? I feel we have become so close in the past weeks that calling you senior undersecretary like you were some sort of low-level minion or flunky just seems wrong. Barty said, as he put an arm around the nasty-minded witch. I can't punish the boy, and Dumbledore won't punish the boy. You, however, are the Hogwarts Inquisitor, charged with the moral fiber of our students, tasked with correcting their steps when they stray from the path of righteousness and obedience. Spare the rod, spoil the child, the muggles say, but we don't need rods, we have wands. Barty smirked at the Inquisitor knowingly. Minister, I cannot employ forceful means of disciple against the students. I had attempted to do so at the start of term, but Deputy Headmistress McGonagall made it clear if I inflicted physical harm or undue restriction on any student, she would transfigure me into a bedpan and then lose me in the infirmary. It is illegal to use corporal punishment against students. Dolores complained bitterly. Barty smiled, and anyone who had known Bartimus Crouch Sr. would know this expression was not the old minister's. Anyone who knew Barty Crouch Jr. as a student or survived meeting him as a Death Eater knew and feared this smile. Ah, Dolores, here is the beauty of it. Potter is competing not as a Hogwarts student, but as a goblin. You will find that none of the regulations against corporal or magical punishment apply to goblins. You can even crucio the little shit and be within the law. You are the law, Dolores. You are the standards of good, of righteousness, of morality. Go torture that ungrateful little shit until he is too terrified not to heel like a good dog when we tug his leash. Barty Crouch Jr. knew he was breaking character, and before anyone he respected, he would be properly terrified. This toad looked for nothing more than license to brutalize those under her power, especially those more attractive, more intelligent, more gifted in magic than she was. Considering she was an ugly, stupid toad who scraped by our ministry minimum owl scores and not a single newt, that was pretty much everyone. Dolores Umbridge looked up at her minister and beamed like she had received an order of Merlin from Merlin himself. Thank you, minister. I think Harry Potter's statements and obvious disrespect for authority is grounds for a very special detention. She paused, remembering threats from other professors. Minister, what if his head of house objects? Barty grinned. Goblins don't have houses, they have pens like all the other animals. I have decided that Mr. Potter as Goblin Champion shall be treated as if he has no house, thus no head of house. Isn't that wonderful? Dolores looked like she was having a religious experience, or some other form of intimate bliss that transformed her face for an instant into almost loveliness. Smiling like a cat that had just been escorted into the blind, three-legged mice holding area, she took several moments before her bliss backed off enough to speak. Yes, minister, it is quite the most wonderful thing I have heard today. Harry Potter was on his way to breakfast early. Some tea and studying was his routine on days they didn't fly early when he was waylaid by Inquisitor Dolores Umbridge. Mr. Potter, while I am sure your moral education by a group of subhumans may be partially responsible, here at Hogwarts we expect every witch and wizard to be responsible for showing the proper respect for the laws, traditions, and authorities of wizarding Britain. You will come with me to detention immediately. Umbridge said, a smile on her face that was honestly so bright it made Harry want to shield his eyes. Hermione frowned. You can't assign Harry detention for an interview the school forced him to perform. For a tournament he never joined, but the ministry and school are still forcing him to perform, simply because he points out he's being forced to perform. Dolores Umbridge puffed herself up like the toad she resembled as she answered primly, I think you will find I can. Harry laughed and patted Hermione on the hand. Go tell Professor Sprout. Don't worry about it. Abuses of authority by petty, self-important bureaucrats was all the ministry was good for when they set about losing the last war. I imagine they have had lots of practice by now. Dolores dragged Harry to her inquisitorial classroom. The class was done in pink and covered with magical portraits of kittens. Not cats, just kittens. They lazed and played in frames all around the classroom, and said classroom had nothing but a blackboard, a large teacher's desk, and a row of 5 student desks. She gestured Harry to one of the desks, then took up a piece of chalk. I will respect and obey all orders and officials of the ministry, she said as she wrote this on the board. Harry pulled out a piece of parchment and reached for his quill. How many times, Inquisitor? Harry replied, resigned to a missed meal and bad morning. Dolores Umbridge opened a gold case on her desk and pulled out a very special quill. Harry recognized it, of course. Every Gringotts goblin would. It was a blood quill, used for inking magical contracts in the subject's own blood. This one, though, had a large, heavy seal worked into it, and Harry could see the tracery of runes worked into it that clearly added to the function of the blood quill in some fashion. "You will not be using your quill, Mr. Potter. You will be using mine. I think you will find that writing this line 100 times will make quite the—" She stopped and simpered in what she doubtless thought was a lasting impression on you. Harry knew 100 lines was not enough blood to bother a teenage boy in his kind of shape, so he shrugged and began writing the lines. As he wrote, Harry swore, as the blood quill began to carve the words into his own skin on his right back of hand, then forearm. Looking over at Umbridge, he saw her smirking, doubtless enjoying whatever loophole allowed her to physically torture children for the crime of not wanting to die for a public relations stunt for the Minister of Magic and Dumbledore. Hissing in Parseltongue, he called upon his magic to weave permanence into the curse of the pen. Doubtless, she had some magic to make the wounds go away, to inflict the pain and scarring, but not get caught. She thought to use pain to break a goblin warrior. She did not know the blood pits and the way of the goblin warrior. Blood was what honor was written in, pain was what resolution was measured in, and vengeance, oh vengeance, was measured by every drop of blood and every moment of pain. Goblins kept accounts. They gave no thing unearned, and they left no debt unpaid. His marks would stay on his flesh until that account was properly balanced. Harry looked Dolores in the eye as he wrote. As the blood began to soak his sleeve, he rose to take his tunic off, baring his chest and arms so both of them could see the wounds writing in his flesh. She flinched to see them not sealing over and hiding, to see the lines march up his arm to his shoulder and onto his chest, as the blood wept from wounds that did not close, and she began to shift in her seat. Harry did not look away. He didn't flinch. He stared at her, and he smiled, teeth bare in the goblin threat display. "Stop looking at me, you disobedient child. This is what happens from letting those subhuman scum corrupt the morals of a human child. You can count the days until Wizarding Britain has rallied behind a strong minister for magic and finally puts your filthy goblins in their place." Dolores said as she began to channel the fear Harry's gaze was causing her to feel into the spite she felt from having to play nice with the subhuman goblins just because they controlled the wizarding banking system. Harry spoke once. "Shut your mouth about my family and clan, or I will shut it for you." Umbridge slammed her palms down on the desk. "Don't you lecture me about your packs, herds, or hives, whatever those vermin you call family call themselves. Just like you, they will be taught their place by force." Harry palmed his wand, but kept writing. Dark Lord Detention, Part 2. Dumbledore strode down the hallway, having allowed enough time for Dolores Umbridge to inflict enough intimidation on the boy that Albus Dumbledore's kind intervention will make it clear how much Harry Potter needs not only Dumbledore's protection, but his guidance. Dumbledore had put off Madame Sprout as long as he could, but if he waited any longer, the stout witch would simply blow the door off the classroom and rescue her badger. He was whistling a happy tune and smiling in that most gentle and forgiving way that he chose to greet all wayward children who found themselves before him, in need of gentle correction and guidance, for their own good, of course. What he found shocked him. Harry Potter was stripped to the waist, and his right arm and chest were covered in flowing script. Dumbledore could watch as the motions of Harry Potter's blood quill carved the writing from his page into his own skin. Turning to demand of Dolores Umbridge why she was using a dark artifact whose possession was worth 1,000 galleon fine, and whose use would see you sent to Azkaban, Dumbledore froze. Dolores Umbridge had her hands stuck to her desk, her eyes wide with fright, face covered in sweat, nostrils flaring in desperate heaving breaths, and without a mouth. Smooth, unbroken skin ran from nose to chin without any sign she ever had a mouth. "Harry Potter, what have you done?" shouted Dumbledore. Harry snarled. "Don't make me lose count. I'm almost done my 100 lines. This really hurts, so if I lose count and find I have carved 105, not just 100 into my own skin, I'm going to be a little cranky." Harry looked up at Umbridge, then blinked, as if he just now remembered her. "Oh, that." Harry shrugged. "I told her to shut her mouth or I would shut it for her when she started talking about all the things the ministry would do to my family to teach goblins their place. She decided that I would be the one to shut her mouth, and I think the transfiguration worked wonderfully. Haven't a clue how to reverse it, but I'm sure I can figure something out." Dumbledore was shocked at Harry Potter's casual cruelty and found himself speaking before his mind could catch up to his mouth. I will snap your wand for this and expel you. Human transfiguration as an attack is prohibited outside of sanctioned duels or self-defense, Dumbledore said in unfeigned horror. Harry laughed, a broken and bitter thing close to a sob. I really wish you would. As the host and my headmaster, when the Cauldron of Dagda stole my life and magic for not participating, as my sponsor you would lose your life and magic in the same moment, so if you want to break my wand, old man, just step right up and do it. Harry blinked. That is 100. If you will excuse me, Professor. I am in a lot of pain and have lost a lot of blood. I need to go see Madame Pomfrey. Dumbledore waved his wand, restoring Dolores' Umbridge mouth and freeing her hands. Shaken at the degree of bitterness, of not just anger but rage in the boy, and at the degree of cruelty his inquisitor had inflicted with the license that he had given her, Dumbledore was shocked. Harry, you should put your robes on. Your wounds are disturbing, Dumbledore offered. Harry strode from the classroom, chest bare and blood dripping from his lines. Why, headmaster, I have nothing to be ashamed about. This wasn't done by my orders, Harry said. Dumbledore heard the shrieks from the hallway and the rising voices as students coming back from breakfast saw Harry Potter carved from hand to mid-chest. The words were visible. Dumbledore could not help but see them, even if he closed his eyes. I will respect and obey all orders and officials of the ministry. The words carved into the flesh of the boy who lived like an indictment, each drop of blood, another bit of Dumbledore, and the ministry's moral supremacy falling away. Dumbledore had been terrified that Harry Potter was turning into another Dark Lord like Voldemort. He had been so concerned that without his influence, Harry Potter was being led astray. Now Dumbledore cast his eyes down at the blood on his school's floor, listened to the shrieking of the harpy that he had invited into his school specifically to be the scourge that Harry would run to Dumbledore for protection from, and wondered where he went wrong. Scourgify, Dumbledore said, and with a flick of his wand, the blood was gone from the floor, not from his mind, not from the minds of his students, and not from the memory of Harry Potter. If the boy who lived became as much of a threat as Tom Riddle, whose fault would it be? When Dolores Umbridge reached out a hand to grab him, to force him to pay attention to her, he windlessly banished her into the chalkboard. While she stood too stunned to speak, Dumbledore walked out to pick up the ruins of yet another plan to get control back of the last hope of the light. He had to succeed. It was for the greater good. 55. Chapter 55, Here There Be Dragons. The first task was a secret, and Harry Potter as champion was honor-bound not to seek out any information about it. As this was part of a binding magical contract, Harry chose not to risk the effects of seeking out information himself. Of course, he was Hufflepuff. Hufflepuffs had a rather loose definition of ownership where tasks, duties, and responsibilities go. While not quite anarchist collectivists, the idea that a Hufflepuff should face a dangerous and difficult task alone, while other perfectly capable Hufflepuffs were doing nothing, struck all of them as wrong. Worse, other houses who had contact with Hufflepuff found that attitude was like some sort of insidious virus that could affect even the most otherwise rational of houses. There were wards preventing anyone who was a registered student of any of the three schools from passing the ward line at the forest edge on the side of the castle, where the beasts for the first task were located. A further charm woven into the air itself, tied to the ley line that ran beneath the forest, to obscure any attempt at magical scrying or apparition into the warded area of the forest. There was an owl ward to make sure you could not simply enchant a spying object and have an owl deliver it, like a muggle spy plane. Dumbledore had thought of everything. Of course, Dumbledore was emotionally stunted and rather over-impressed with his own brilliance, so the secrecy of the first task was violated more thoroughly than the former Minister Fudge's ethics. Hermione looked at Noodle with her utterly reasonable expression. This, of course, Noodle always gave into, as she was utterly reasonable in a race of mammals that were so often in need of reptile supervision that the one rational being among them must always be listened to. Dollar Speaker has not asked me to, Noodle objected. Well, he won't, will he? He's a boy and a goblin, both of whom have these silly concepts about honor and fair play. He is willing to get himself killed rather than compromise his principles. Hermione hissed reasonably. Dollar speaker is stupid. Fair play is for prey. Secrets exist to be stolen. The one who stinks like two humans and the liar of the light both wish speaker harm. They are not to be trusted. It is far, it is cold. I will encounter many prey and not have time to digest them. Noodle complained. It is unfair, and speaker would never ask it of you. He would never send you alone and without protection into the forbidden forest. Hermione hissed reasonably. Dollar speaker dares to speak as if the mighty Noodle requires protection. It was not Noodle that fought the Queen of Serpents and made her pregnant. Noodle was wise and mighty and avoided her for months, only risking the Chamber of Secrets when his mouse giver was in danger. Then Noodle was wise enough to bite her eyes. It is possible to fight legendary monsters without making babies. Hermione stroked Noodle's head and tickled beneath his chin. This is why I am sending you alone into the forbidden forest to hunt secrets. What is the task? What tricks do they conceal? Who else knows? All the things Speaker needs, and is too boy and goblin to think to ask. Noodle turned to look at her seriously. She looked him right in the eyes and dropped her occlumency shields to expose all of her thoughts, needs, and speculation on the issue. Noodle looked into every corner of her mind and hissed in irritation. Secret Agent Noodle, do you accept your mission? Hermione asked. Mouse Giver has chosen to unleash the mighty Noodle upon the forbidden forest. I will bring you every secret. Hermione nodded at her Noodle. I will give you not one, but two specially potioned mice, all live and touched with a warming charm to heat you up inside when you get back. One for the mission, and the second one because I am going to need you to make sure any of the other champions who send lesser scouts also receive the information. Noodle hissed. We do not share prey. Hermione stroked Noodle's flanks and ego both. I know, but Speaker has sworn that none of the other champions are allowed to die. It is war between Speaker, the liar of light, and the human who smells like two humans. Hermione frowned again. She had Fred and George check their map. The liar of light was Dumbledore, and the map showed human who smells like two humans showed as Barty Crouch, and he was supposed to be Barty Crouch Sr., and with Barty Crouch Jr. having died in Azkaban, he should definitely be the only Barty Crouch. Still, since the whole not a rat fiasco, Noodle's definition of people had always been something Hermione paid attention to. Noodle accepted that war, and a second mouse, were indeed reasons to violate the most sacred serpent maxim of I killed it, get your own, where it came to intelligence hunted down by secret Agent Noodle. Mouse Giver was wise as always. Who else but she commanded the mighty secret Agent Noodle? The rest really were helpless mammals. It was a long crawl, and cold. He thanked Mouse Giver again for the spatial expansion charms she had placed in his venom sacs. A normal rock viper would have run dry 20 meters into the forest. It bothered Noodle that the cow-sized acromantula was just going to lie there, killed and uneaten, without a helpful mammal with a knife and spatial expansion bag to carry it home to make kebabs. But after the first dozen kills, the forest spread word that something far deadlier stalked the forest this night. It was still cold and wet. The things I do for that ungrateful speaker. Honestly, he doesn't deserve me or Mouse Giver. This is why she never gives Speaker any mice. He needs to work a lot harder if he is ever going to earn a mouse of his own. Noodle slipped through the trees. Dragons. There was a wolf who was not a wolf trying to be still, but he flinched whenever the dragons roared and shot fire. He was one of the other champions. Still, he was at the tree line. What could even a decently nosed mammal learn from there? Noodle slithered around. The trees were closer from the other side. He saw the half-giant oaf that cared for the magical creatures for the Lyre of Light sneaking in with the half-giant headmistress of the Shining Maiden. The oaf was telling the half-giant headmistress of the Shining Maiden everything about the particular dragons that were here. Why? Was he not bound by oath? Was he not bound by loyalty? Was he not supposed to be Hogwarts staff and supporting the Hogwarts champion? The half-giant headmistress picked up Hagrid and snogged him so hard he kicked his feet helplessly until he went limp. Dropping him back to his feet, the oaf continued to babble out all the information he knew, which was rather more than Noodle had suspected the oaf could contain. Noodle looked on at the giant mating rituals and interrogation and nodded his respect for the half-giant headmistress of the Shining Maiden. He determined her name now, Mighty Seductress. He wondered if he should ask the water witch how to build up Mousegiver's upper body strength. Clearly, the lift in the air and snarg helpless method was effective at managing mammal males. Perhaps she could use it on Speaker, and Secret Agent Noodle could stay in warm castles, not crawl through soaking wet and freezing nighttime forests. Still, the Hogwarts oaf was an oaf and missed things. Noodle crept forward. Welsh green, Chinese firebolt, Swedish short snout, Hungarian ridgeback, all as advertised. Very dangerous, of course, but well fed and thus not likely to be overly aggressive. Deterrence would be enough. Wise reptiles did not risk injury or spend energy uselessly after prey that were difficult or costly. Noodle slithered on, his notice me not charm from Mousegiver working where his more potent invisibility would not. Dragons could see the invisible and through most illusions. Their magic was wild, potent, and very strong. They killed a lot of wizards who thought care of magical creatures was a joke course. Wizard meant wise one, but outside Speaker and his friends, most of them were not. What was that inside the crates that the dragons were not letting the handlers near? What was it? He tasted the air. Dragon scent, plant scents, and shell scents. Shell scents. Noodle looked. Eggs. Each of the dragons was a nesting mother with living eggs. Sweet slithering Slytherin, they were nesting mothers. The mammals are idiots. Nesting mothers would kill anyone that approached their eggs, risk any injury, and keep fighting well past their death. No compulsion would hold them, no charm still them. They would draw upon all the wild magic of their blood and burn out their own magical core without hesitation to free themselves to defend their eggs. Mammals were stupid. Speaker must be told. Mousegiver is wise. Clearly, she remains too good for Speaker. Had she not sent Secret Agent Noodle, all the champion mammals would die. Noodle caught the wolf, who is not a wolf, slinking back to the castle, and ambushed him. The wolf opened its jaws, as if the dog had any chance against a reptile of clearly superior mind and body. He pinned the wolf, who is not a wolf, with his legitimacy, and drove into his mind like the serpent he was. Into his mind, he drove the conversation of the Hogwarts oaf, all the things the wolf might not have overheard. Then he drove into his mind the images of nest, 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 and nest. Showed again the irrational protectiveness of the nesting mothers, until the smelly furred champion nodded his understanding. Noodle then wrapped himself around the fluffy thing. He was no dog father, but he could carry a tired and clearly superior Secret Agent Noodle back to the warm and dry stone of the castle. If anyone in Hogwarts thought a lean mountain wolf carrying a large rune-marked rock viper to the door of the Hufflepuff common room was odd, they had the good survival sense not to point it out. Hogsmeade Village earlier that day. Fred and George had dragged Millicent Bulstrode along to Hogsmeade to meet their brother Charlie, who was back in town from the Dragon Preserve in Romania. It was adorable watching the ginger terrors blush about wanting her to meet the cool bits of their family, being Charlie and Bill. But she knew she felt the same urge to interrogate brother Charlie, the dragon handler who just so happened to be next to Hogwarts just before the first task. 20 minutes in, the bombshell that they were all nesting mothers, and that the contract held 3 pages of terms and conditions for the actual eggs being present for the challenge made Millicent go cold in a way her ice rune couldn't ward off. Nesting mothers. The minimum force to go after a single nesting mothers was a full squad of 5 trained elite witches or wizards specializing in dragons. 1 student alone. Suicide. Tea party with Luna, she had been locked out of the common room again, this time from the shower. Her clothes had been stolen, which was annoying, but she had her wand tucked behind her ear, so that was fine. Draco had wanted to go curse her roommates, but that wouldn't make them like Luna any more than they did now, and Luna could not help how she disturbed them. She made tea and cakes, and wove flower crowns for the various fair creatures that came to take tea with her. Soon she was laughing. Even if the Silver Lady of Ravenclaw wept at how far her house had fallen, Luna was determined to be happy, no matter what her housemates wanted. They wove new clothes for her, and fine shoes, even though she never asked them, but they had taken her gifts and would give some in return. Draco just sighed and tried to manage his nerves. When the Banshee finished her minced meat turnover and gave voice to an unearthly wail, Draco's nerves finally shattered. Luna was busy comforting the Banshee who wept after she wailed. It's the babies, you see. She must cry out for those who will die, and indeed a human will die tomorrow and a dragon, but what she cries for is always and only for the babies. The cow-tailed Huldra or Hollow Woman sighed to Draco sadly. Babies, Draco choked, surprised at the thought. The Huldra nodded. Mavis, that is the Banshee, always cries when she has to scream the death of babies. It is the part of her gift that makes it a curse. When one of you lot dies, it's usually a net positive, isn't it? The Huldra said coldly of the death of humans. Draco unconsciously nodded. His Hufflepuff friends would mostly object, but honestly most humans would be good dragon food as far as Draco was concerned. Still, that meant the first challenge was dragons with babies or eggs. A person, a dragon, and some number of babies would die tomorrow. Merlin's bowls, Harry had to know. Draco tried to steady his teacup. Calming drafts or no, his nerves couldn't take many more of these high-stake tea parties. Luna comforted the crying Banshee, because clearly a girl locked naked out of her common room by her dorm mates should of course be comforting fairy death-omen creatures at a tea party. It would be unslytherin to report the bullying to Flitwick. He shouldn't care about another house's internal affairs. It would be impossible for him to just arrange an accident or two. Luna would see, and it would make her sad. It was so frustrating to have a problem he could not bribe, blackmail, threaten, or even murder his way out of. Ravenclaws were just wrong. Luna looked at him in her newly woven fairy gown and her fine leprechaun shoes and smiled. She had got the Banshee to stop crying. Draco forced a smile and raised his teacup. He guessed he would have to make sure his Hufflepuff idiot was not the human that died tomorrow. Draco winced and warned them about the babies. Hufflepuffs got all irrational about dead babies, even monster ones. Draco ate a fourth strawberry tart. He was going to gain 5 pounds and lose all of his hair. He just didn't know how many of these high-stake tea parties he had left in him. Breakfast at the Hufflepuff table, Cedric found himself pulled out of his seat by the Weasley twins. "You are being," said Fred, kidnapped. "It is useless," continued George, "to resist us." Finished Fred, Cedric looked from the mad Weasley twin to the mostly rational Slytherin beta who smirked and shoved Hufflepuffs downstream on the bench so Cedric could be dropped beside Harry. "Wait here," said Millicent. "We have another kidnapping before you can accidentally overhear something." She continued, as if this was the most rational thing in the world. Cedric Diggory looked at Harry, who shrugged, as if to say no one told him anything either. He looked to Hermione, who frowned in the way that says you will be told what you need to hear when bushier and wiser heads decide to tell you. He turned to look at Neville, who just grinned back. You can't fight it, so you may as well snag the waffles while they are hot. With alarm, Cedric realized there were not waffles enough for everyone and put his seeker reflexes to work. Love is war, but breakfast is not controlled by any international convention on lawful use of force. It was every badger for itself. The great hall exploded as Millicent came back to the table with Fleur de Lacre thrown over one shoulder and 2 ginger terrors fending off Beauxbaton defenders. When Fleur was deposited between Cedric and Harry, they looked to see a sheepish Victor Crumb walking towards their table behind a smug-looking noodle. How a rock viper could slither in a superior fashion was unclear, but everyone in the hall could see the snake was indeed slithering smugly as he came to the table trailing the Durmstrang champion. "I have taught not a wolf to heel," announced Noodle proudly, before slithering over Hermione's arms to rest his head comfortably beside her cheek. Hermione cleared her throat, then gestured for Draco and Luna to slide in on her side of the table, facing the champions. Purely by chance, some information about the secret first task came to my attention. I put together a booklet for each of you. Crumb looked in surprise. "This is 60 pages, he protested. Cedric patted him on the shoulder. "With footnotes, graphs, statistics, and historical references. That is just Hermione. Accept it and move on." Fleur de Lacre objected. "It is illegal for a champion or an instructor to share information about the tasks. They are secret." Hermione shrugged. "It's illegal to seduce Hagrid by bench pressing him, then snogging him stupid in the Forbidden Forest, but here we are. However seductive your headmistress was, Hagrid misses things, and some of those things will get you killed." Turn to page 6. Fleur did and blanched. Nesting mothers are the insane. Luna had tears in her eyes. The Banshee cried last night, then wept. A human will die and a dragon and some babies. The 4 champions froze. A human will die. Breakfast turned to lead in their stomachs. Harry reached into the pouch at his side and drew out 3 other pouches. He handed one to each champion. "This is 1,000 galleons. It is a gift from the Goblin Nation to the champions of the three schools. All we ask is that you take no gold from the cauldron of Dagda, and you offer it no blood. In return, I make you this oath." Harry said softly, "I swear upon my life and magic, I will take no gold from the cauldron of Dagda or those who use it in this challenge. I will offer the blood of no champion. I will use my wit, my will, my wand, and my weapons to see that every champion lives at the end of the tournament. If any fall, it will be because they were beyond my strength or cunning to reach. So mote it be." Harry's wand slashed down, and the wash of magic flared around them. There could be only one champion, and 1,000 galleons was a fortune, yet here he was just handing it to them and binding himself from striking out at them, worse, binding himself to strike to protect them. Crumb spoke first. "What are you asking?" Harry smiled. "Don't die. Don't kill each other for some fairy trick or some worthless politician's ego." Fleur frowned. "They will kill you for this. You embarrass people who can make entire families disappear, and you do it in front of the whole world." Harry laughed, and Fleur shuddered. "They wrote my death scene in 1981 in my cradle. They need me to die, and they even have a plan about how to milk it for all the public relations points they can muster. It is just my choice that they don't get to kill anyone else. You understand? Dumbledore, the Ministry, Voldemort, they are all playing a game that ends with at least me, and probably Voldemort dead at the end. You three are just lesser pieces, trapped between the White King and the Black King, while the game is played by cold old men to whom your lives, dreams, and souls are just coins to spend to buy a few more years in power. I don't want them to get them. I want you to live. That's it. That is all I ask," Harry said, and none of the champions could find a hint of deception in it. When the Hufflepuffs got up and left the table for class, Cedric Diggory, Fleur Delacour, and Victor Crumb were left alone, staring at 3 pouches sitting on the table. Their expressions were troubled. 3 broomsticks, Hogsmeade, 2 days before the challenge. Griphook, Harry, Fleur, Victor, Cedric, Charlie Weasley, Hagrid, and Dragon Master Viridish of Gringotts looked across their cards and the silver sickles in the middle, and then at each other. The game was canasta, played in pairs with multiple decks of card, and a silver sickle, a card rode on who took each trick, plus of course the bets on how many each would get. It was a serious game in the goblin world, and not unknown in the wizarding one. "So how would you steal an egg if you had to?" offered Harry to Cedric. "Strong Protego and the fire freezing charm, I guess, then count on using my broomstick to sneak past it and grab an egg. If they are chained down, they can't get after me, and I only have to survive a second or two of their breath." Griphook and Viridish laughed in Goblin and shared a comment in Gobbledegook. Harry translated it for Cedric. "That means fried wizard smells like fool, tastes like pork. It's a common expression among goblins," Harry clarified. Hagrid nodded. "Yeah, that's maybe a bit cold way to put it, but not wrong." Charlie helped the other champions out. "Dragon fire is like phoenix fire. The fire freezing charm won't work on them, and Dumbledore could maybe cast a Protego Ultima that could take the full power tail strike or claw attack of a dragon, but there isn't a parchment's chance in Dragonfire that you lot could." Crumb shrugged. "Avada Kedavra. It is legal on non-humans." Charlie and Hagrid immediately shouted their objections, but Viridish laughed again. "Good luck, little wizard. Only the eyes, the inside of the mouth, the inside of the how you say place poop come out. Yes, other than that, none of your killing, cutting, or cursing magics can get through the scales. Charms that can encompass the whole body can if they are strong enough and subtle enough, but the brute force ones can't make the dragon's core do anything to stop being a dragon even for a heartbeat." The game lasted for hours, and the champions lost heavily. Griphook and Viridish got so drunk they actually tipped the waitress, largely with what they just won from the foolish human champions, and even the Weasley boy was staggering as he left, his pouch a lot fuller than when he arrived. The 4 underage champions had only drunk butter beer and bitter knowledge. They looked as if they would not sleep for a week. They had so much thinking to do. They did not have a week. They already knew someone died. They walked out of the 3 broomsticks, no longer as certain it would not be them. They would need new plans, but now at least they had the information they needed to make good ones. Day of the challenge, the champions' tent. Victor Crumb was in his Bulgarian national team Quidditch gear, it being the only dragonhide armor he owned. Cedric Diggory was in a similar outfit that was so new he squeaked when he bent his limbs. but his father was quick to get him some when told what challenge his boy faced. Fleur de Lacre was in a blue form-fitting track suit that differed from a muggle coverall only by the fineness of the acromantula silk it was woven from and the amazing figure it covered. Her hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail. She looked more prepared for a jog or an engine tear down than a dragon fight. Harry Potter's outfit drew the most attention. He wore a kilt of black basilisk leather and boots of the same, nothing else. There was a heavy goblin steel dagger sheathed on his left hip and a wand holster on his right wrist. His right arm and chest were covered with weeping red writing, as if someone had cut words into his flesh with a knife. Fleur and Victor found themselves reading the words, as did Rita Skeeter, who gestured for her photographer to snap a photo. Dolores Umbridge began shouting that she must have approval of all photographs before publishing, but Rita ignored that ruling, as she ignored most rules save to note what it was they tried to protect, so she could better target it. My, you are rather well developed for a boy of your years. All that beta training has paid off, I see. What is this carved all over your arm, and hasn't it been healed? Daily Prophet readers want to know. Dolores Umbridge tried to get between Rita and Harry, but Ludo Bagman, whose credit with the press relied on him giving them access, wrestled her away. A fat former beta, his added girth only made him a better wrestler, and he easily overpowered the pink ministry guard Toad. I will respect and obey all orders and officials of the ministry. Rita Reed and her photographer got a close-up shot of the still weeping wounds. Harry, why would you carve this into yourself, and why hasn't it healed? Rita asked, actual concerned. Harry smiled grimly. I didn't carve it into myself. I was given detention by Inquisitor Umbridge. She had been given leave to use a dark artifact, a common blood quill used for signing magical contracts, but one with a dark enchantment that didn't just take my blood to write the lines, but carved each line into my flesh as I wrote them. She had been given specific license to torture children into obedience by Minister of Magic Barty Crouch, and been given freedom to do so by Headmaster Albus Dumbledore, who wanted those injuries healed, so that the only one who knew he was allowing your children to be tortured would be the ministry staff who did it, and the headmaster who allowed it. Harry smiled again. I am a student, bound by my oaths to submit to the punishment of the school. I am forced to compete in this tournament or die by the will of the ministry and a magical object of pre-human origin, the cauldron of Dagda that they chose to bind all of our souls to so they could put on a nice show for the wizarding public. I am not bound to shut up about what they do to us or how they try to keep us from talking to the press about it. Lors Umbridge had pulled her wand from her purse, but Ludo Bagman was too canny a politician to let a ministry official shoot a child in front of the press, especially not the boy who lived. Rita could feel the headlines rolling off his tongue and smiled, with genuine warmth. Harry, your attire is enough to get you arrested, outside of certain clubs where honestly witches would be throwing galleons, hotel keys, and underwear at you. Can you explain why you aren't in robes or armor like your fellow competitors? Rita asked. Harry grinned. Victor and Cedric are dressed to play a very dangerous game, but I am not here to play. Fleur is dressed to do hard and dirty work, so she and I at least understand what is in front of us. Me, I am wearing my kilt, boots, and weapons, for I am a goblin going to war and need nothing else. Rita beamed at him. This boy bled copy, scandal, and controversy. She was beginning to think she might take a year off and turn this into a book before it was over. Barty Crouch swept into the tent, his eyes bright, and his grin feral. He looked upon the champions and wet his lips, almost trembling in anticipation. He clapped his hands together, ignoring the worried look Dumbledore sent him at the odd behavior. Well, champions, all geared up and ready to go, ready to find out what your first challenge is. Well, my friend Ludo. Barty stopped where he was still wrestling Umbridge for her wand. He flicked a stunner at his subordinate casually, and when the pink toad collapsed to the floor, Barty continued as if nothing had happened. My friend Ludo here from Magical Sport has a bag full of tokens, each of which represents your specific challenge in the first task. Go hard, Ludo. Ludo turned, and with a leer, descended on Fleur de Lacre, smoothing his hair back and trying to suck in his gut. Ladies first, beauty before honestly everything else. Please, my dear, pick your token. Sighing and trying to ignore the preening Ludo bagman, Fleur reached in and pulled out a writhing green dragon that tried to bite her fingers. She cast a charm-filled gaze at it, and the little green dragon began to coo at her and rub its face on her thumb. "Welsh green, I can do this," she said. Barty turned to Dumbledore and complained. "They aren't surprised. Why aren't they surprised? I was promised surprise, Dumbledore." Minister Crouch complained angrily, causing Rita to gesture for her photographer to snap that photo too as the minister and Dumbledore went nose to nose. Scandal, scandal, scandal. Dumbledore's information security was as terrible as ever. Victor Crumb pulled out a Chinese fireball and sighed, but nodded. Cedric Diggory pulled out the Swedish short snout. He swore loudly. "Oh, thank Merlin, it's not the Horntail." Then, realizing what he said, he turned to a smirking Harry and finished with "Sorry, Harry." Harry stepped forward and lowered a single finger in. Wincing, he pulled it out, and a miniature Hungarian horntail was biting and clawing at his finger as if it could savage the entire wizard, even being no more than 2 fingers long. Harry held up his dragon and eyed it coldly, then nodded, closed his fist around it and crushed it. As he let its broken body fall from his fingers, he didn't notice the photographer's flash go off. His mind was already on the moves he needed. Barty Crouch sat in his ministerial box with no one but his imperious cursed security detail. Technically, he only imperiused Proudfoot, but he got Stavendish, and so on and so on. Now they would all kill and eat babies in front of their mothers if he told them to. Come to think of it, that might be a way to get some use out of the mudbloods that had to be purged when the Dark Lord returned. He would have to keep that in mind. The net effect today is that he didn't have to pretend to be old stick-up-the-ass daddy today. Barty could be himself while he watched, only sip his polyjuice when the challenge was over and he had to meet the public. One champion would die today, not the wench. She died last. Death of a beauty would set the stage for Harry Potter's heart-warming victory. Trust and adoration of Potter must peak for the 3rd challenge, so when his Dark Lord used the brat's blood to restore himself, then butchered their boy who lived on magical screens shared throughout half the wizarding world and every center of magical Britain, they would see the might of Voldemort reborn, see the death of their prophesied champion, and give up all hope at the first shot of the new war. Barty had made plans for each. Probably take the pretty boy first, Cedric Diggory. He couldn't stand the father, so it would be extra spicy to have his boy killed, then polyjuice himself and go offer the old coot his deepest and most sincere apologies. Still, the wench could get herself killed, burned to death, or even eaten alive. That could be fun. What good was being a Death Eater if you couldn't enjoy seeing the hope of the future die screaming in front of you? Let the games begin. Fleur de Lacre stalked out, from rock to rock, the silencing charms on her feet, the scent-cancelling charms she cast on her body and clothes, and the notice-me-not charms she cast upon herself were not enough to make her invisible, but she would not swiftly be noticed until she got close. She had no intention of getting close. She plotted the point of the golden egg, used her magic to fix its position relative to the larger stones of the field, so that her arithmancy could predict its exact position relative to the Larget stones that went deeper into the earth. Then Fleur sat down and began to chant. The ground beneath her shifted from loose dirt to the far denser, magically enhanced stone. This was a charm used by sewer workers in France. It turned loose soil and clay into magically hardened stone denser than metal for water and sewer pipes. It was the magic used to make tunnels and bunkers during the Grindelwald War, not magic that pure-blooded students of wealth and status would learn. None of them thought sewer workers or line infantry wizards had anything to teach the great and powerful. Fleur did not want the respect or admiration of the crowd. She was the most beautiful woman in all of France. She knew it. They knew it. Whatever faint attraction, fame, and public adoration had once held long turned to shit in her hands. She knew the public to be fickle, jealous, needy, and almost equally savage and stupid. Fleur cared only for victory, not what people thought of her methods. Using the same magics her ancestors had used to make the famous sewers below Paris, she tunneled under the earth of the field. The first the Welsh green knew of an issue was when 2 pale hands reached from the soil to grab the golden egg, and the dragon went wild. Flame shot into the tunnel, but Fleur had already sealed the entrance with the enhanced density stone of the sewers, and all the dragon fire did was shatter stone of the first foot or two. None made it into the tunnel with the witch. Emerging from the other end of the tunnel under her sound and sent cancelling charms, her notice me not lasted until she was 10 feet from the exit to the grounds, when the Welsh Green finally caught sight of her. It charged, but its heavy neck chain pulled it up short of the door as Fleur bolted through. A win without style, without drama, and that one only boos from the frustrated crowd. Fleur dusted herself off. Her workman's robes in blue showed not a scratch or scorch. That was what mattered. Victor Crumb, true to his Durmstrang training, went on the attack. Darting in among the stones, he struck with a conjunctivitis curse to blind one eye of the fireball, then apparated to the other side. Underestimating the dragon's hearing, he was met with a blast of fire as he launched his second attack, taking severe burns as he blinded the dragon's other eye. Both champion and dragon half mad with pain, Crumb again apparated close to the nest and snatched his egg. The dragon, in a panic, turned to charge him, and Crumb transfigured the ground into a wall that tripped the spinning dragon, causing her to crush 2 of her eggs. The death of her babies drove the fireball mad, blind, and wounded. It lunged after Crumb, who ducked around a large standing stone, trusting the rock to catch the fireball's chain and pull it up short. Instead, the dragon's chain hit the edge of the rock with so much force the chain broke, and the dragon dove its jaws down at the panicking Bulgarian, still several meters from the door and safety. Crumb launched his most powerful cutting curse into the mouth of the snapping fireball, driving up through the roof of her mouth and into her brain. A nesting mother and 2 precious eggs were dead, but Crumb lived. He limped to the champion's gate and staggered through it. Cedric Diggory did what everyone assumed Crumb would do and summoned his broom. The Hufflepuff Seeker knew his own abilities on a broom and the strength of a Seeker in striking first and fastest. He also knew it took a team to keep a Seeker alive, and was alone. Alone with a wand. He sat about transfiguring dirt into crows. Then he sat about animating crows. And then, because he wasn't an idiot, he set about casting illusions on the crows to make them look like him, and notice me nots on himself, so that in a crowd of Cedric Diggories on broomsticks, he would be the least noticeable. Dragons could see through invisibility, but they still noticed the closest moving objects first. Cedric would just fly less aggressively than the crows illusioned as himself that he had programmed to harass the Swedish short snout mother. Cedric waited for his chance, high and far from the nest. He waited until his crows had baited the dragon away from the nest. 2 of them flamed to nothingness already before he dove. He dove for the nest, and Sloth rolled on the bottom of his broom to snatch the egg so he would never slow, and pointed himself to the champion's gate. Barty Crouch had given up shouting. "He's there, you broody lizard. No, not that one. The one in the back, you ignorant reptile, stupid crocodile, futtering idiot." "You are ignoring the real boy," Barty shouted. "The one he picked to die wasn't even going to get burned." The Swedish short snout saw Diggory at last, but the chain would not reach to the door. He cast his most powerful acid charm, and the fire-resistant links weakened like 1,000 years of rust. As Diggory flicked his wand to open the champion's door to fly through, the champion's gate opened before him. The Swedish short snout was a heartbeat behind, driving its head through the gate after the egg stealing Cedric Diggory, and the dragon handlers charged the gate to slam it shut before the dragon could reach him. The short snout couldn't reach Diggory, but a lunge, stretching her neck, just a bit more than the keepers would have believed possible, caught Janice Tewksbury by the leg. The witch screamed as the short snout dragged her back into the arena, throwing her high in the air before slamming her broken body onto the ground where Fang and Claw opened it and gutted the dragon keeper before a screaming crowd. Barty shouted from the ministerial box. "Still the wrong one." Turning to his security detail, he complained. "This is what happens when I am not allowed to kill people. Entirely the wrong people die. Mark my words, not killing people is always a mistake. Killing people is always the answer, or you need to find new questions." The Imperiust Auras knew on some level that something in that statement was wrong, but wrapped in the bliss of the Imperius curse, they found it simpler to just sit back and let Barty tell them when and if they needed to think at all. Harry Potter slinked onto the field, and began to carve runes into the stone, taking a finger to the weeping wounds on his shoulder. He colored them in his own blood. When the circle was complete, it burned gold, and Harry reached in and pulled out his own broomstick. It was the general consensus of Quidditch fans that beaters were the least skilled flyers on the Quidditch pitch, that every other player save the keeper was a better and more skilled flyer. This was not without some substance, because every other member of the Quidditch team took to the sky to play, and they gave themselves totally to the joy of flying. Beaters went to war. The sky for them was not a place to play, but a battlefield where a moment's inattention was broken bones or shattered skull, where not just your own life, but those of every teammate hung on the razor edge between your skill with broom and bat and your enemies. It was his wand first that Harry had in his hand as he dove towards the Hungarian horntail where she guarded her clutch of precious eggs, and the one golden egg he needed. Diving towards the horntail, Harry screamed out his charm. "Lumus cordis solis," Harry shouted, and felt his wand heat, and his magical core drop enough of its power he caught his breath. But for one instant, his wand blazed with the light of the heart of the sun. The crowd screamed, but the dragon, who had been sighting in to both burn and bite the diving boy, screamed and ducked her head below her wings as she was momentarily blinded. Casting a powerful Protego Maximus, Harry skimmed over the nest, casting his most powerful shielding charm on the eggs. No more babies died today. No one else got to die today. Harry would not allow it. Spinning on his broom and sheathing his wand, Harry posed for a moment in mid-air to work out his angles. In the stands, Hermione's eyes went wide and she swore loudly. "Merlin's balls. Harry isn't wearing anything under that kilt," Hermione shouted. After a bark of laughter, Sirius patted her on the back. "Pretty sure those aren't Merlin's balls, Hermione." The blushing Hufflepuff had her eyes covered and her cheeks flaming, so she missed the next critical bit of action. As the Hungarian horntail pulled its head out from under its wings, Harry took his goblin steel dagger in his hand and banished it with as much magic as he could muster. With a chime like a church bell, the goblin's silver blade cut through the steel links, connecting the dragon's collar to his chain. Morgana's titties, he missed. Sirius shouted in fear as the knife struck like a Muggle tank cannon, shattering not the impossibly dense scales of the Hungarian horntail's neck, but the chain that bound it to the ground. It was Harry's only goblin silver blade. Griphook's claws tore into his own seat as he snarled. My son did not miss. He struck the chain for a reason. Harry swept under the dragon's chin and off into the sky. The dragon flapped its great wings and tore after him. Makes sense, said Millicent, nodding slowly. Only way, really. Neville agreed. Sirius looked at them like they were mad. What are you talking about? He's flying around on a broom made of wood with twigs that are literal kindling, being chased by a fire-breathing dragon that hunts from the air. Fred grinned and spoke. Azkaban will do that to you, George continued. Too much time on the ground. Fred agreed. Can rot your brain, George mused. Dragons hunt from the sky. Fred expanded. Things that crawl on the ground. George made a flying motion with his hand. Beaters take to the sky. Fred slammed a fist into his palm. To hunt things that fly. Millicent took pity on the older Gryffindor dogfather. The dragon followed Harry into the sky, thinking it's on a hunt. Neville continued. Harry led him there because he is going to war. Griphook smiled now, his hands relaxing. Then it is already over. The dragon has lost. Sirius looked from beater to beater to beater to goblin, then finally turned to Hermione for some semblance of reason. She shrugged helplessly. Look, I just pointed out he didn't put on any underwear. I never said he was in danger. Honestly, in the sky he just knows where everything is. He could steal the missiles off a Muggle jet fighter mid-flight and then paint it pink just for giggles. I have seen him steal letters from post owls just to make them chase him when he wants to play tag. She shrugged. Harry is fine. I just hope he doesn't kill that dragon. Sirius looked unconvinced, but screams from the crowd made him look up. Harry had led the dragon into a harsh climb in a tight spiral, relying on his broom's tighter turn radius to make up for the higher power of the dragon when it chose to sprint into the sky. Harry stalled his broom and dove past the dragon so close he used his beater bat to hammer it on the sensitive nostril as he dove his broom along its flank, so close his hair brushed the wing root. Harry dove for the ground like he intended to plant his broomstick as a new cash crop. The stadium screamed, sure the boy was going to die in front of them. Barty Crouch was losing his mind in the ministerial box. If Potter got himself killed, and his master could not have blood from his greatest enemy while he still lived, the ritual for his resurrection was ruined. Sirius' heart stopped as he saw his godson fall like a star from heaven, with 5 tons of rage, flame, and primordial hatred following after. Harry watched the dragon as it turned to follow him in the dive. Like any raptor, it tucked its wings tight to its body to dive after its prey. The wings would flare to allow it to control its strike. At least they would if they weren't stupid enough to follow Harry Potter in a dive. He reached back with his wand and shouted, "Expecto Patronum." The bright silver basilisk flared from Harry's wand and wrapped like a living chain around the dragon's body, binding its wings to its body. Harry pulled out of his dive to skim the ground at less than a meter's clearance, close enough his boots had to be tucked up not to drag. The dragon lost seconds where its wings were bound, and gravity had its way unhindered. With no more control than a meteor, the dragon struck the ground. Harry swept his broom around and dismounted at the dragon's snout. He cast Incarcerus, and chains bound the dragon's mouth shut. Moving to the dragon's eyes, where the stunned beast whimpered helplessly, Harry Potter faced it and spoke, his magic filling his words with power. "I am Speaker. I swear upon my magic, my blood, and my name that I will not harm you or your eggs. I will remove the thing the humans placed in your nest, then I will free you. This I swear." Harry's wand slashed down. Walking slowly to the nest, he banished his Protego, took the golden egg, then recast the Protego. Walking slowly back to the stunned Hungarian horntail, he banished both the Incarcerus on her jaws and the Patronus that bound her wings. Turning his back, Harry Potter stalked to the champion's gate and strode through. In the ministerial box, Barty was losing what little grip he had on his mind. He cast Reducto twice at the nest to shatter the eggs and spur the stupid lizard who just sat there and watched Harry Potter walk away like this was a picnic, not a life or death battle. The damned Protego held at the long range Barty was shooting from, and worse, people in the crowd and judge's box were pointing and shouting about the visible blasts, shattering themselves on the precious shield above the dragon eggs. The boy who lived walked through the champion's gate totally unwounded, even unwinded. Barty snarled. He would skin the boy's corpse when the Dark Lord was done with it. He would make himself a set of book covers to document all the atrocities he would commit once the little hero was safely dead. No one made a fool of Barty Crouch and lived. Sirius wiped the sweat off his brow and swore softly, "That bloody boy is going to drive me to drink." Wordlessly, Griphook handed over the flask he had just taken a long series of swallows from. Sirius brightened, eyed the goblin. "Not your first time," Griphook snarled, then gestured about the whole stadium and complained, "This is my circus." He complained, then pointed a claw at Harry Potter heading for the judge's stand. "Because that is my monkey." The entire section of Harry Potter's family and friends laughed at the boy who lived, also known as the monkey who drove us all to drink. The scores came out for each. Fleur got a 10 from Madame Maxim and Dumbledore, a 2 from Karkaroff who was bored and saw no violence, a 5 from Bagman who wanted more of a show, but noted there were no casualties he had to answer for. Her total was 27. Cedric got a 9 from Madame Maxim for brilliant magical work, a 7 from Dumbledore because someone died, and somehow Cedric is responsible for a dragon-killing handler. A 5 from Karkaroff who doesn't like Hogwarts but got to see some blood at last, and a 5 from Bagman who thought Diggory did well but would have to answer for the dead handler for a score of 26. Crumb got a 3 from Madame Maxim, who didn't like all the killing, a 5 from Dumbledore who was at least glad it wasn't people this time, and admitted that a solo dragon kill by magic alone was amazing spellwork. Karkaroff gave him a 10 because he was Crumb, and killing is always good. Bagman had signed all the contracts with the dragon reserves and knew the penalties the ministry would have to pay for the dead mother and destroyed eggs. He awarded only a 5 for a total of 23. Harry got a 7 from Madame Maxim because he was clearly a cheat of Dumbledore's and a dirty second champion in the cub. But he flew so beautifully and didn't harm any dragons, so even she could not give him less than that. Dumbledore gave him a 5 because if he gave Harry less than that, Pomona Spout and Hufflepuff House would riot. The last reordered Hufflepuff riot was never, and Dumbledore did not want to be the headmaster that finally sparked one. Karkaroff thought it was an exciting battle, but ruined at the end with weakness and mercy, so gave a 3. Ludo Bagman got his show, and not a single dragon, handler, spectator, or even competitor was hurt. He gave a solid 10, leaving Harry with 25. The first challenge was in the books, and the champions took away their golden eggs with Ludo Bagman's cheerful hint that everything they needed to know was inside, and they had until the week after the Yule Ball to figure it out. 56. Chapter 56, Tea Parties and Detentions. A better class of detention. Millicent, Fred, George, Harry, and Colin Creevey were in detention with Minerva McGonagall. Harry knew why he was here. He accepted that in general Fred and George found detention to be their natural habitat, but the presence of a smirking Millicent Bulstrode, an embarrassed-looking Colin Creevey, surprised him. Professor McGonagall looked down sternly at Harry Potter, Goblin Champion, and frowned her fiercest frown. Mr. Potter, while I am willing to make allowances for differing cultures of our students, such as our Muggle-born, and yourself as a goblin, there are limits. Limits like public decency. Harry scowled back. Goblins do not wear shirts to war. It's either full armor or bare skin. If it cannot stop a dragon's claw, a cutting curse, or goblin silver blade, then it is worthless. Let the enemy see my strength and my scars and no fear. Harry was almost shouting by the time he finished the line that had been drilled in him since he was a toddler. McGonagall gave a half-smile. Mr. Potter, while it does me good as an educator to know you have both read and can quote the works of King Heartfang Bloodaxe, ancestor of the very Gringotts who founded the bank that binds our two peoples together in relative peace, let me remind you, goblins as a race do not ride brooms. Harry blinked, his mind faltering as McGonagall went off his rehearsed script for anti-goblin oppression into unknown and therefore dangerous conversational territory. McGonagall sighed. She reached into a spatial expansion top drawer and pulled a large poster from her desk. She frowned at Harry and unrolled the poster. On it, Harry Potter rode his broom, flared to a stop, then threw, and banished his dagger through the dragon's leash. Mr. Potter, I removed no less than 3 of these posters from the female dormitories of Gryffindor House. I trust you will see how this violates Hogwarts' student code of conduct. Harry blinked, as while he had obviously lived it, he hadn't seen it from the viewing stands, ahead, and somewhat below his broom as he turned and flared, causing his basilisk skin kilt to catch the air. His bare bottom was shown as he manfully flexed to power his broom around, and for an instant something was visible hanging below the broom. Merlin's balls. Harry swore Millicent had her head tilted and was obviously examining the poster closely. Pretty sure those aren't Merlin's, Harry. Fred and George laughed. Miss Bulstrode, may I remind you why you are in this detention? McGonagall asked sharply. Millicent smiled. While continuing to profess my innocence, I choose to accept administrative non-judicial punishment without issue to keep my permanent student record clean. McGonagall gave her a long, hard stare that Millicent returned with a look of such innocence that Harry checked to see if his wand and coin purse were still on him. McGonagall turned to examine Colin Creevey, who fingered his ever-present camera guiltily. Mr. Creevey, perhaps you would like to enlighten Mr. Potter as to why you are here. McGonagall asked with sweetness that had enough acid in it to dissolve a troll far larger than Mr. Creevey. Colin attempted to repeat Millicent's speech, but did so terribly that he eventually gave up and muttered softly, Freedom of the press. I'm being oppressed. Fred and George laughed again, and McGonagall sighed, and gave each of them lines to write out 100 times. Harry's was actually enough to make him feel embarrassed. A senior student is expected to act in such a manner as to impress upon his or her juniors the very real dignity and honor of the position of witch and wizard, and instill in them the very real desire to always and ever be worthy of the magic with which they have been gifted. Harry felt his Hufflepuff shame kick in at being a bad example to his juniors. Say what you will, and Harry said a lot about the headmaster, his pet inquisitor, and the ministry. The house system of Hogwarts relied on older students to teach the ethics of wielding their growing powers responsibly and for the good of all. I'm sorry, Professor. Goblins don't wear anything under their kilts. Harry muttered his defense. I never thought about how it would look upon a broom. McGonagall sighed and ruffled Harry's hair not unkindly. So Phileas Flitwick explained to me in the staff room. Pomona Sprout assures me the Hufflepuff girls have already owled your mother to determine a properly goblin answer to underwear that does not smack of elvish lace or wizarding pantaloons. It will be provided for the next task. I'm told Miss Granger had a suggestion that everyone seemed to approve of. McGonagall looked satisfied at the practical Muggleborn's involvement, but Harry and Millicent knew how Hermione's practicality often ignored social norms, the way bludgers ignored gravity and human weakness. He feared this would not be his last clothing-related task detention. When McGonagall got called to the door by one of her prefects with a problem involving Ron Weasley being caught stealing and eating a footstool that had been transformed into a birthday cake, said transformation being temporary, and due to reverse shortly, inside, said Mr. Weasley. She had to leave the group alone in detention to help stop one of her Gryffindors from being detonated by cake-related furniture accident. So, Millicent, why are you in the slammer with us? Harry asked. I thought don't get caught was rule one of Slytherin. Millicent smirked. Those are basic rules for starter snakes. We get way more devious once we get comfortable. I am in the slammer because wee Colin here rolled on me as the person who took his amazing fode and monetized into the hottest-selling poster in Hogwarts. I have sold more copies of that than the first-year exams. Harry blinked. But you should have been smart enough to escape detention. I mean, there is lots of stuff everyone knows you did, but no one can prove. Millicent started pulling out posters from her spatial expansion bag at her waist. But Harry, I needed time with you, a desk, quill, and plausible deniability for you to autograph these posters. I mean, I didn't have Ronald eat a footstool for no reason. Fred and George grinned and high-fived. Of course, she would hire Fred and George to turn a footstool into a birthday cake and leave it in the same room with Ron, having instructed him loudly and publicly not to touch it. Ron was as hard to figure out as a switch, and just about as easy to manipulate. Harry began signing the posters, looking at the notes about how to personalize each of them. It was best not to argue with Millicent about things related to money or revenge. Still, if McGonagall was just hearing about Ron and the cake-related near-death experience now, what were they in detention for? Fred, George, if McGonagall doesn't know about the cake, why are you in here? Harry asked, knowing he would regret it. Fred smiled. Millicent's fault, obviously. George argued, or Neville's. Fred agreed, definitely Neville's. George continued. But it was our dear Queen who made it all possible. They beamed at Millicent, who smirked. Harry signed another poster and broke down to ask. Made what possible? Harry asked. Millicent explained. I helped them with their animagus transformation, of course. My young lions are actually young lions. Still not housebroken, but they are Gryffindors, and they aren't really happy if you totally civilize them. Harry stopped. Wait, McGonagall is a transfiguration master, and the animagus transformation is one of the most difficult transfigurations possible. She is an animagus. She should be over the moon that you both mastered it. I mean, the last Gryffindors to do it were the Marauders, and before them just her in the last century. I mean, even Dumbledore never did it. Millicent laughed happily. They got detention for debasing and abusing their gift for puerile and juvenile purposes. Harry blinked and tried to follow that one. What did you do? It's not like a pair of rogue lions are exactly stealthy inside a ruddy school. Fred and George dropped to their knees and clasped their hands together as if in prayer. Fred shouted, "We follow the Prophet Neville." George cheered, "Long be his bottom." Fred closed his eyes in happy memory, walked into the common room as lions. George sighed. "Big furry cats with ginger hair so soft you could." Fred smirked. And did George concluded, get every girl in the Gryffindor common room to stroke at once. Fred sighed. Heavy petting from all three Gryffindor chasers at once. Harry shook his head. Is this what you and Aunt Narcissa mean about a Gryffindor headache? Millicent smirked and shot Harry a thumbs up. After all, there was just no housebreaking Gryffindors. Harry wrote his lines in the sure and certain knowledge that besides Colin Creevey, who meant well but had zero restraint with a camera in hand, he was still the most innocent in the room. Rotten eggs, Harry, Hermione, Neville, and Millicent sat around his egg ready for anything. They were in the Chamber of Secrets, trusting its wards to keep what they did secret and contained. Sura the basilisk was looking up from a pile of her children who were sleeping in a ball with her in the middle as her speaker, and his closest did strange, wizard things. Noodle was some distance behind, not trusting his wizard to keep him safe, but also not trusting his wizard to stay safe. Honestly, Speaker was going to make him grow grey scales, which snakes did not do, but no other snake had Speaker for his familiar, so Noodle might well be the first snake to go grey with age. Harry finally opened the egg and screeching that was worse than a hag dragging her claws down a chalkboard, while under the sonorous sound amplifying charm came out. Harry slammed it shut as everyone screamed. Hermione shook her finger at Harry. "You clearly broke it. Nothing makes that kind of noise on purpose." Millicent shuddered. "Not true. It sounds exactly like Pansy Parkinson when I introduced her to leg waxing. Probably shouldn't have started with the Brazilian, but I didn't know she was opera trained at the time." Neville looked confused as to what leg waxing and Brazilian referred to, but Hermione just patted his arm to let him know that he was too Neville for some discussions, and he let it go. Still, he looked at the egg. "Harry, you are a goblin, and they do those puzzle boxes right. Maybe it's not broken, maybe it's just not being opened correctly. Why don't you try opening it every way you can think of, and we will see if they sound better." Noodle looked at Speaker and realized the silly mammal was actually going to do it. Do it again and again, and expose his delicate reptilian hearing to that noise again. Angry hissing came from the nest where mother and brood of basilisk had been disturbed. So Harry knelt down and inscribed a quick sound ward on the nest so his kids would not be disturbed, then set back to figure out how many ways this could be opened. Noodle, being a wise and clever reptile, slithered off the platform and decided to go decrease the local frog population in the moat that surrounded the Queen's bower in the Chamber of Secrets. To his surprise, the sound of the egg echoed oddly in the water, and he could hear a song. "Come seek us where our voices sound. We cannot sing above the ground, and while you're searching, ponder this. We've taken what you'll sorely miss. An hour long you'll have to look, and to recover what we took, but past an hour, the prospect's black. Too late, it's gone. It won't come back." Noodle had solved the mystery. Secret Agent Noodle was again the hero of the story, and only reason his mammals still existed. He thought about Speaker's Hufflepuffian tendencies and that riddle and decided to let his mammals suffer a little more. "We've taken what you'll sorely miss." Speaker was not a complicated mammal. This would either result in Mouse Giver or Noodle being drowned on some sort of time delay for the silly mammal cup. Those who died would have their souls enslaved forever to the Tuatha De Danann. For the crime of endangering the immortal soul and the life of his beloved Mouse Giver and the all-important secret Agent Noodle, he decided to allow them to suffer in the screaming until he ran out of frogs, or Mouse Giver showed the first sign of distress. Speaker should suffer a little. If Mouse Giver drowns, Noodle was going to bite him. Not to death, but probably daily, or at least every time he was reminded that Mouse Giver was endangered for his mammal games. Honestly, it's enough to make a grown reptile cry. MMMMMM. Tasty, tasty Chamber of Secrets frogs. He swore Salazar Slytherin had some of Mouse Giver's magic to enhance prey beasts. Slytherin favored frogs, but nothing like that ethnic food to switch things up. The egg rang like a bell as someone used a stunner on it to shut it up. Well, Noodle would let them play a little more before he took pity on them. They needed to remember how helpless they were without him. Otherwise, they might follow their own judgment, and no good could possibly come from that. He would have to ask them for some wizarding way to not drown. He was not trusting the Liar of Light to keep him or Mouse Giver safe. Besides, Death Eaters, Man Who Smells Like Two Men, and Liar of Light all have reasons to sabotage the challenge. Noodle would need to make his mammals prepare for treachery. Great Hall for breakfast. The next day, Fred and George grabbed Cedric, who grabbed an emergency sausage before he was carted off down table to accidentally overhear things he could not be told. Millicent descended on the Ravenclaw table, and this time Fleur just held up her arms and let Millicent Princess carry her to the Hufflepuff table. From the look on the boys' faces, and no few of the girls, the Amazonian beta girl princess carrying the inhumanly beautiful feminine Fleur de Lacre across the Great Hall would be more talked about than the next task, at least for a while. Victor Crumb was no fool, and when Noodle rose to his full height before the Slytherin table, Crumb simply tossed him a sausage and rose to follow him without protest. Noodle snatched the sausage from the air and decided Wolf, who is not a wolf, was also not stupid. Wolf, that is not a wolf, but not stupid, was too long for a useful name. But the next wolf shifter he met was in danger of being known simply as Stupid Wolf. Sitting at the Hufflepuff table among the fourth years, the champions looked amused but less surprised when Hermione handed out booklets for each of them. The fact that two Gryffindor gingers, Draco Malfoy and Luna Lovegood, slid into place with the group was simply accepted by Hufflepuff at this point. Even if the whispering of the Great Hall said it was still both against Dumbledore's unique and frankly indefensible interpretation of the rules and the clear wishes of the Ministry in regard to the tournament secrecy. Hermione, being the blunt information transmission object that she was, began the conversation simply. Make the egg talk. You have to drown it under water. By some coincidence, the idiots putting on this tournament are going to find the one closest to you and drown them in the Black Lake. You will have an hour to get them out alive, assuming there is no sabotage, which there will be, or the headmaster and ministry haven't made some deeply flawed assumptions and equally foreseeable mistakes, which they no doubt already have. Cedric looked nervous. How are they going to pick who is closest? Is it chosen by our teachers? Looked at Cedric and took his hand. The cauldron of Dagda has chosen. The one you love most, the one whose death will tear your soul apart, is the one it will pick. Cruelty is beauty to the Fae, as is heroism. Either you will be a hero and please them, or the one you love will die before your eyes and please them. He's going to kill me, Cedric whispered. Harry looked confused. Who is going to kill you? Cedric looked defeated. My dad. Hermione and Neville looked confused. Why? Harry asked. Draco swore softly. Leave it alone, Harry, just leave it. Millicent winced and also patted Cedric's hand. Fleur looked worried. I am Vila, we are creatures of air and fire. Water is hard on us, it works against our magics. Magics that are based on water do not work well on us because it fights our magic. Hermione frowned. I have seen your charms work. You are far too powerful for that to bother you. A simple bubblehead, which is air magic, and your strength will do fine. Fleur hissed. Gabrielle is 8. Her magical core is not even formed. She cannot even cast a Loomis even if we broke the law to get her a wand. What will your headmaster do? A spell or potion for a witch or wizard that is based on water magic, like a water-breathing potion, will interfere with her magic, and she will drown. Crumb's face turned to stone. My mother is very dear to me. She is a muggle. Potions rely on the magic in her body. Father tells everyone she is a squib, at least from a magical family, but she isn't. She is just a muggle nurse who patched him up in a muggle hospital when he was nearly killed by a dark wizard. If she is given a water-breathing potion to keep her alive, she will die. She always said love was her only magic, and now it will kill her. Neville smiled. It's okay. I am nowhere near as smart as Hermione or brave as Harry, but I am about the best gardener you will ever meet. Fleur looked at him oddly. Herbology, she asked. Potions are stronger. Neville smiled. Potions are stronger because they take the magic of ingredients, the magic of the potioner, and the magic of the person drinking them to work. He looked up and spoke seriously. Herbology is my best subject. It isn't potions, where we make things found in nature do what we want. It is old magic, ancient magic, really. Herbology is about finding the magic that the plants draw from the earth, the sky, the sun, the water, and the spirits of each. This magic is drawn slowly, shaped and woven into every fiber of the plant, so that each part of the plant displays a different combination of those magics. We learn to find those magics that do things that we want, and isolate them from the portions of the plant whose magics do things we don't want. Crumb frowned. Still just a more limited form of potion. Neville shook his head happily, proud he could defend one of the least admired branches of magic to champions of all three schools. No, potions need your magic to work. Magic plants already have all the magic they need, and they will work as their magic dictates no matter who or what eats them. They would work the same on a Vila, a witch, a cow, a muggle, or an ogress. Two of the champions relaxed visibly, but Noodle's gaze was fixed on Cedric Diggory. The boy's face was a grim line, and his fists were balled so tight his knuckles shone white. Noodle would have to watch the Hogwarts champion, something in this task Cedric did not expect to survive, and Noodle did not know what it was. Tea party before the challenge. Draco and Neville flanked Luna as she wove flower crowns for the various fairy creatures that shared her table this night. Is it always like this? Neville asked in a whisper as he took a cup of tea with a polite bow from a green hag whose seaweed hair, terrible black claws, and shark-like teeth argued she was better suited for drowning fishermen and sailors than high tea. Neville bowed to the green hag reflexively, for any child raised by Augusta Longbottom would rather die by fire than be impolite to a lady over tea. Draco shuddered. You have no idea. The silver lady looked on angrily as Luna poured ghostly tea into her cup. Luna, why can you not go to my tower? Why can you not return to your dormitory? Luna looked up, and her wide, innocent eyes clouded for a moment. It seems someone has accidentally warded the door to the common room against me. I see my hairbrush is left by the eagle of the doorway, so I guess they used my hair to ward it. I can't pass the door to enter the Ravenclaw dormitory unless I shave off all my hair. Luna said. Draco and Neville hissed. Neville half rose before Draco stopped him. He spoke up anyway once he sat down. You have to go to Professor Flitwick about this. It is bullying. You cannot allow it to just continue. Neville argued. Luna let a single tear fall. That won't make anyone like me. Ravenclaw is lost as her diadem. The house isn't whole, and someone has to fall through the cracks. At least, I have you to take tea with. At that point the Banshee screamed, and Luna clapped when the Banshee finished screaming and picked up a scone and buttered it happily. Luna beamed and hugged the Banshee. That is marvelous, Mavis. Thank you so much. The Banshee patted the Ravenclaw girl on the back as Draco and Neville looked on in alarm. Luna hugged each guest in turn before settling down onto her seat and lifting her teacup. Mavis screamed but didn't cry. That means that even though some people die, none of them are children. Luna cheered and raised her cup. The fairy and Draco all raised their cups and drank, leaving a shocked Neville to follow behind. Draco looked at Neville and shrugged. Harry's fine, and if Gabrielle really turns out to be Fleur's hostage, she's going to be fine. If Cedric's hostage turns out to be a younger sibling, they will be fine too. Neville tried not to shout. But what about everyone else? The green hag laughed and picked up a minced meat tart, holding it before her eyes and smiling with her terrible sharp teeth. Well, boy, someone has to do the dying. The green hag bit into the minced meat tart with obvious enjoyment, and all the fairy creatures at the table laughed, with the sound of so many gentle bells and trilling birds. Neville looked at Draco shuddering, and wondered how the Slytherin was brave enough to face these tea parties multiple times a week. Neville was sure he would either have broken or stormed the Ravenclaw tower. Eyeing the weeping silver lady, the Ravenclaw ghost, he knew that it wasn't only the Hufflepuff at the table who could not bear to see how Ravenclaw treated its own.